Hey everyone. Hey Shay Shay. Hey Brittany. Let's see. Shay Shay. Brittany. Is that okay? I got two Britneys in here. Okay. Both Britneys. Hello, hello. Hit the like button. Hit the like button. Okay, y'all. I think I got two stories today. Maybe I'll do three. All depends how these go. Y'all, this week went so fast, and I am so glad. Y'all got anything planned for your kids for Easter Sunday or whatever? I don't, because I don't have no little kids. And my daughter said they're not even thinking about Easter. you know, they're gonna I know two of my daughters taking their well, I only got two daughters with small kids. One 12, one 4. Then my other daughter, her daughter is 9. And they're taking them out today to they having like a little cookout in the Easter egg hunt. They're gonna take them there. But that's it. And she said Sunday she's gonna cook and make them some cupcakes and stuff like that. But it ain't gonna be like, you know, a lot spending money and stuff. Sometimes people ain't into all that stuff. Yep, 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 yep. And I am leaving tomorrow until Sunday afternoon. I'll be back. I'm going to spend a night with one of my kids and just enjoy myself. Yep, yep, yep. Hey, Miss Hill. Hey, girl. Girl, you rock with me every day, girl. Let's see. Hey, Miss Bridget. No small kids. I know that's right, Shay Shay. And my other granddaughter is 18. She ain't think about no Easter. One of my grandsons, he 18. He ain't think about no Easter. So and my 12-year-old granddaughter, she don't really think about no Easter neither. Okay. You know what she wanted for Easter, y'all? She went to her dad's house last weekend, right? So she told her dad, she said, Dad, I don't want to go nowhere for Easter, but you know what I want? He was like, What? She said, she seen this little, like a little girl, little, like a little, what you call them things, y'all? The body, the pocketbook you throw over you. What they call them, y'all? Y'all know what I'm trying to say. Shit. Well, she wanted one of those, which was a Coach bag, and her daddy ordered her that, right? And that was all she wanted for Easter. She got a Coach bag for Easter. Her dad ordered her that. And her mom told me it came in the mail yesterday. And that was it. That's what she wanted for Easter. So, you know, her dad ordered her that and she was glad. No kids, just cooking. Okay, okay. Yeah, I don't blame you. Yeah, I asked her this morning because they on break. I said, "Girl, you got that Coach bag you wanted?" She was like, "Yes, my daddy bought it," and she said, "I'm happy." So she ain't think about no Easter neither. But my daughter's taking them out. They're gonna meet up with their sisters today. My other daughters, and they going out in their community where they live at. They having something big for the kids today. So that's where they're taking the kids at too. So yeah, Roy D, I have to work on Easter. I'm cooking tomorrow baked beans, ooh, with hamburger meat and onions and bell peppers. Ooh, hamburgers, hot dog, grill. Ooh, that sounds, girl. I'm coming to your house and eat, girl. That sounds good. Ooh. Yeah, I like to make homemade hamburgers. And I like to put the onion, the pack of onions, y'all. It come in a box. And I pour in my ground beef to make burgers and give it a good taste to it. If y'all know what I'm talking about, the onion, I can't think of the name of it, but I buy this. It's a box. It's 2 packs come in it. Hmm. That sounds good, girl. I need to come over here and get me a plate, okay? Plate. Yeah, some people not into all that stuff. This stuff is just about money nowadays. Just things ain't like it used to be neither. Everything's about money. Money, 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 money. So yeah. And then for being that he ordered the oldest girl the Coach bag, right? he ordered the baby girl 2 pair of sneakers because he got 2 kids by my daughter. So he got her the sneakers. So yeah, she got her Coach bag, honey. It was a crossbody, the crossbody little bag for her. She got, and come in a little Coach little thing, and she was excited. Yeah, that's what it is, Brittany. That's what it is. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I buy that. Oh, it tastes so good and make your. Oh, Brittany, do you use that? If you don't, try it. You know. Ooh, it tastes so good, and put your other seasoning in with it. It's good. It's really, really good. Yeah, that's what it is, Miss Bridget. Yep. Hmm. Oh yeah, onion soup mix is good for him. Yes, and meatloaf. Yep, I use in my meatloaf too. Absolutely. Yeah, it's good. Hmm. That sounds good, baby. So, y'all, we're going to get into our story today. If y'all see the title of this story, y'all let me know if y'all can hear it. Now, y'all, this was a beautiful baby. Man, I can't stand when people do kids wrong. But we're going to get, and I got another story too. But let's get into this story. Let's get this commercial out of here. I can't stand commercials. Hold on, y'all. Let me just, hold on, because I got to bring it up too. I'm just getting the commercial off, y'all. Then I'm gonna bring it up to the stage. Okay.
Investigators, she could feel pain. 4-month-old Ayani Soders never had a chance. Police say
Okay, let
her
me know if
tiny
y'all can hear
body
it. Put a one in
endured
the chat.
weeks of brutal abuse, broken bones, healing fractures, and ultimately a blow she could not survive. Investigators in Dauphin County, Pennsylvania say she was allegedly killed by her own
This just
mother and
happened.
her mother's
This is not
boyfriend,
old. This
the
is new.
ones who should have rocked her to sleep, but instead are accused of silencing her cries. I'm Kennedy Walker, and I'm going to walk you through the heartbreaking tale of red flags that were reportedly never acted on until
Thank
it
you,
was too
Brittany.
late. She was
Hey,
just a
Mama
baby,
Dudes.
helpless and innocent, and at 4 months old, her future was stolen before it even began. On March 28th, 2025, baby Ayani was pronounced dead. What doctors found when she arrived at the hospital wasn't just
What
tragic,
you
it
said?
was
Hey,
criminal. According to an affidavit obtained by WHPTV, Ayani suffered from a compound fracture in her right femur, skull fractures, and multiple rib fractures, some of them already healing. The signs, police say, pointed to something far worse than a simple accident. 20-year-old Layla Soders, baby Ayani's mother, reportedly told police she had dropped her daughter in the shower, claiming that's how the injuries happened. Police say she even reenacted the supposed accident, but officers weren't convinced. And soon, her story reportedly changed. According to court documents, Soders
yes,
allegedly
Brittany.
admitted there was no fall or accident. Instead, she said it was her boyfriend, Jose Melendez Padilla, who caused her daughter's injuries. Soders claimed Padilla had been punching, kicking, and throwing the infant since February. And though she knew what was going
No,
on, she
4
allegedly
months old.
said nothing. The documents
Kicking
claim
a
she even
baby.
allegedly skipped a scheduled doctor's visit to avoid raising red flags. So Dauphin County Police started digging. According to investigators, Jose Melendez Padilla allowed them to go
Okay,
through
my
his phone.
sisters. Okay,
What
baby.
they
Thank
found,
you.
they say, was a disturbing look inside the mind of a man who reportedly never wanted that baby to begin with. One message allegedly read, quote, "I hate seeing her every day. I don't
Oh,
want her in our
Jesus.
lives." And
Y'all, when I heard that part, y'all, when he said that about, hold on, y'all. Let me get this commercial off.
another message, Melendez Padilla is said to have texted, quote, "I hate that you felt her for 8 months, a life that is not ours. I would love to love her, but I swear I can't." Court records claim he even suggested Soders give Ayani up for adoption, but she didn't. Instead, police
Because
say
we
she
have things.
continued
What's
to let
going
her
on, my
boyfriend
brother?
stay.
What's going
She
on?
even let him watch the baby alone. On March 22nd, just 6 days before Ayani died, Melendez Padilla allegedly told Soders the baby had
Yo,
gone
how can you kick a
unresponsive. He
4-month-old
claimed to
baby
have given
around?
her CPR,
How
but still,
can
no
you?
one
Oh
called
my
for help.
God.
Then, on March 27th, the day before the
Let me be
baby's
quiet.
death, Melendez Padilla reportedly sent another chilling message,
Yes,
pointing out
Brittany,
that
Lord have
Ayani's right leg,
mercy.
the one with the fracture, looked much fatter than the left. But the next day, it was too late. On March 28th, baby Ayani died. The autopsy told the rest of the story, reportedly traumatic
Yo, this
injuries to the
happened
head,
last month.
neck, and chest, fractures across her tiny body, and swelling to the brain. The cause of death? Homicide. Both Melendez Padilla and Soders have been charged with the infant's death. Melendez Padilla was charged with first-degree murder. Investigators later revealed he was in the United States illegally. Soders, the baby's mother, is facing several charges, including third-degree murder, endangering the welfare of a child, and conspiracy. There was a candlelit vigil and balloon release for Ayani, a little girl who never had a chance. A tragedy that police say could have been stopped, but wasn't. I want to thank Odoo for sponsoring this news package. Odoo is an incredible all-in-one business management software that provides you with a range of applications.
Hold
One
on,
of my
y'all. She's
favorite
gonna
Odoo
get back
applications
to
is
it.
their Projects app. Managing projects can
Y'all,
be tough,
it's
but with
nowhere I could do a
Odoo's
baby like
Projects
that.
app,
Like,
it truly
literally.
does not have to be. Need a clear timeline? The Gantt view maps out your tasks and helps you stay on track. Prefer a more flexible approach? Well, the Kanban view lets you at a glance. Plus, Odoo's comprehensive remaining time, so your milestones and 15-day trial of Odoo's all-in-one business solution and see how it can make your life easier. Scan the QR code on your screen or check it out at our link, odoo.com/LC-News-Project. And joining me to talk more about this is legal expert Matt Mangino. Matt, thank you so much for coming on today. Let's just dive right in. Layla Soders is facing charges of third-degree murder and conspiracy, while Jose has been charged with first-degree murder. Can you explain the legal difference between these two charges?
Miss E.
Well, in Pennsylvania,
Absolutely,
first-degree
Brittany.
murder is the planned, premeditated murder of someone, and so it doesn't have to be something that's been planned out methodically. A plan, a getaway, all these different things. It can simply be, using lethal force on a vital part of somebody's body, and in this instance, it's an adult man causing continuously over a period of time, serious injuries to this child that results in the child's death. So third degree murder is a lesser offense, and it's a killing with malice. So here we know that essentially this child, this 4-month-old, is being routinely beaten by the paramour of the defendant, in this case, the mother, and she does nothing to stop it. Not only doesn't she do
Absolutely.
anything to stop it,
Absolutely.
she actually covers for him. She actually makes up stories to the police to try to justify these horrific injuries to the 4-month-old. And so, while he is the person who's physically harming the child,
Right.
her conduct rises to the point where it's malice, and she can be responsible for third degree murder in that regard.
No, they should have first. Both of them need
If these
first.
allegations are true, can you
Real.
explain why the charges against her are less severe than those of Jose?
Well, looking at these texts that were exchanged.
If you've been waiting to apply for disability benefits, don't. Hi,
Yes,
I'm Sarah, and I'm a lawyer at Atticus. Applying as soon as you're unable to work or struggling to work due to your medical condition can really help strengthen your case. The process takes time, but winning benefits is life-changing for so many of our clients. The average disability check is worth about $1,500 a month, but some people receive up to $3,800 monthly. You also automatically
between Jose and the mother. He specifically says that he hates this child.
Yeah,
He
how could
can't
he
see
say that
this
about a
child being a
4-month-old
part of
baby?
their life. And so, he has a plan to eliminate this child. So, it's not as though he got a gun and shot the 4-month-old, but what he did over a period of time, because we know this has went on for, more than a short period of time, because there were healing injuries, healing rib injuries. So we know that this abuse went on, for
Hey, Grammy
a
Boo.
period of time, and ultimately resulted in the child's death, which, if we read those texts, seem to indicate that was his intent. His intent was to kill this child through, serious physical abuse over an extended period of time.
Is there a chance that the mother could, take a deal and potentially, get charged with manslaughter or child endangerment? Or do you think the state just has a case for her to, take a higher charge?
Well, this is a serious case. The idea that this 4-month-old
Hey, Auntie Terry,
went
what's going
through
on? Happy
this
Thursday.
horrific abuse over an extended period of time, makes this the kind of case where, prosecutors don't necessarily want to bark. If they feel confident in their case, and we know, not only are these injuries well documented, and certainly not the result of falling in the shower or falling off the couch or being dropped. These are intentional acts to inflict serious bodily injury or death on this child. And we have this history of text messages which really shows his intent to eliminate this child from their relationship. I mean, he says, "I hate this child, and I can't imagine us being together with this child." And the child's dead. That's a
All right, this feels almost illegal to know, but our windows were so old and just desperately needed to be replaced. So I called a few contractors, but they all quoted me a hefty $10,000 or more for new windows, and I almost lost it. That's when my friend, who's a realtor, stopped me and said, if you're a homeowner and your windows are older than 5 years, you might qualify for
premeditated murder.
And let's just talk more about the evidence in this case. Reading the affidavit, they said there's text messages, there may even be pictures. Is this an open and shut case for the most part for the prosecution?
Well, it's not an open and shut case because, this isn't your typical first degree murder case when you're talking about the paramour here. Okay. Because, as I said a moment ago, it's not as though, he got a gun and shot the child to death or stabbed the child to death. This is a pattern of abuse over a period of time. So,
Yes.
can he argue that I didn't intend to kill the child? I didn't intend this to result in death. I was abusive toward the child, but it was just because I was enraged because the child wouldn't stop crying, whatever that defense might be. So, could there be some doubt that it was his intent ultimately to cause his child's death? Because that's what first degree murder requires. It requires intent. It requires an intentional act of killing another human being. And that's that's what's alleged here, that by these texts, by the fact that he
Yo, to be
knew the
honest, I
child
thought the man
was
was
in
a lady
serious
by the face at
danger,
one point.
having seizures and other things, and not taking that child immediately for treatment. The other side of the coin, with regard to the mother, is she knew this abuse was going on, and she entrusted this child yet again to the defendant on the day that the child died. I mean, that, from a mother is a horrific conduct. It's hard to even comprehend. It's one thing that the child was abused, and you didn't intervene to stop it. It's another thing to let that child stay with the abuser, and that's what she did.
Yeah, the one
Exactly.
thing about it, this story is definitely a
And then another
tragedy.
thing, a
Any way that you look at it, it's
4-month-old,
just
y'all,
so,
what can
so
a
sad.
4-month-old do
But
to
let
you?
me ask you
You
this.
know a
Given the
4-year-old
alleged
can't do
history of
anything too,
violence, could the
right?
defense argue
But
that
a
Soders was under the
4-month-old?
influence or
Oh my God.
intimidated by her boyfriend?
Thank
How
you, Mama
likely is
Dukes.
it that that would mitigate her charges if that is the case?
Well, I'm sure that the defense is going to explore every possibility in this case, and they have that responsibility to zealously defend their client. It's one thing to say, "Hey, I was afraid to leave because I was being abused myself." Okay. It's another thing when the police intervene and ask you what happened, and you say the child fell in the shower while I was bathing the child. You're with the police now. You're protected. You're away from this offender. So if he was abusing her as well, this was her opportunity to get out of that harmful situation. So that's going to be tough to make that argument that she felt afraid and intimidated when she still lied to the police when she was interviewed.
And just reading, in detail about the baby's injuries, it was truly horrific. Based on the evidence described, how significant are the injuries to the baby in determining the cause of death, and how do they support the homicide charge?
Well, number one, you have healing injury. So this is an ongoing conduct of abusing this child. So you have fractured ribs, fractured skull, compound fracture of the femur.
She was beautiful.
So you have, devastating injuries. Some, more than one that could possibly have caused this child's death. So a medical examiner is going to come forward and say, listen, these injuries could not have happened by anything else but an intentional act to injure, harm, kill this 4-month-old. And so that's going to be, important testimony in this case. Not only the cause of death, but the manner of death. It's a homicide because these injuries sustained over time caused the 4-month-old's death.
And we touched on this a little bit in the beginning, the alleged text messages that the police read.
If you're not happy with your online podcast engagement metrics, I have the solution.
Come
Riverside is an online platform for
Wait,
podcast
yeah.
recording in the highest quality possible. Since I moved to Riverside, my average listening time increased by 84%. Before Riverside, I was using a video conferencing tool and noticed that every time there was a glitch in the recording or issues with the sound and video quality.
From Jose, given those reported text messages, what role do communications like these play in the prosecution's case?
Well, what it does is that it gives the prosecutors, it gives investigators, the defendant's state of mind. What was the defendant thinking at the time? And in this case, what the defendant was conveying was that he hated this child, and he saw this child as a wedge in their relationship. Mm-hmm. So you can infer from that, if he wants the relationship to continue, which it seems like, there's continued communication, then if she's not going to go to mother, then the child has to go. And I think that's what you can conclude from these text messages, that it was his intention to kill this child so he could continue a relationship without the child.
If you were his attorney or the mother's attorney, how would you defend your client?
Well, yeah, I think we touched on that a bit. From his perspective, the only thing that I think he can say, and is it going to be believable or even plausible to a jury, is that it wasn't his intention to kill this 4-month-old.
Exactly.
I mean, if you
read
the report, it talks about him
cry,
kicking,
they're wet, they're hungry, they sleepy, they don't
the
feel
4-month-old, throwing the 4-month-old around.
And punching.
These and punching. So these aren't accidents. These aren't fits of rage where you slap a child because they won't stop
Happy Thursday,
crying.
baby.
This isn't a situation where the child is unruly, and this is a 4-month-old. So I mean, let's think about it's not like the child could be acting up. That you throw the child on the couch or something. This is brutal, aggressive attacks to cause serious harm and ultimately death. But with that said, I'm sure the defense is going to say, hey, he did some bad things, but it wasn't his intent to kill. He didn't mean to harm the child. He was upset. He was whatever excuse they're going to come up with, but ultimately trying to convince the prosecutor early on, and maybe ultimately a jury someday, that it wasn't his intent to kill. From her perspective.
Well, let me ask you this for both of them. Well, do you think that maybe their defense attorneys will have them both undergo some type of psychological evaluation?
Well, yeah, I think that has to happen, for both of them if they're willing to undergo that. I mean, you may look at, does the paramour have, some mental health problems? Does he have some, post-traumatic stress disorder? I mean, there's a million different ways that you can go, but you're going to look at all those potential options. And with regard to the mother, what was her mental health? What was her mental state? Is she going to say, she didn't realize the gravity of the abuse? I mean, I think there was a photograph sent where the leg in which the femur was broken. He makes a comment, look, one leg's bigger than the other. I mean, yeah, because you fractured the femur.
What he just said was the case I covered.
I mean, all those messages are going to come back, to bite both defendants in this case.
How might the fact that Jose was allegedly in the U.S. illegally impact his trial or sentencing?
I don't think they're gonna worry about that, but I think he'll be in jail for the rest of his life, so they probably won't have to. Hold on, y'all. Let me get. And once he get out of jail, he probably would never be able to stay here again. I can bet you that.
Well, at least at the outset, it's gonna create a lot of emotion, because we know on a national level, this is what a lot of people are talking about, and that's illegal immigration and crime. So it's going to be a hot button issue. Whether he was here legally or illegally, I don't think is going to have a huge impact on his trial. It could be a factor ultimately when he's sentenced. But listen, in Pennsylvania, if you're convicted of first-degree murder, it's life without the possibility of parole. So it's not as though he's going to get
remember, y'all,
a lenient sentence in any way, or a harsher sentence in any way. In fact, the death penalty is still on the books in Pennsylvania, even though we don't carry it out very often. So this could possibly be a death penalty case as well, because this is something that the prosecutors will review moving forward.
We talked about how many years he's potentially looking at. What about the mom?
Well, murder 3 is under the crimes code in Pennsylvania. And as I said a moment ago, so first-degree murder is life. Second-degree murder is life. Third-degree murder is a felony 1. It's punishable by up to 20 to 40 years. So there are sentence guidelines which take in factors such as prior records and things like that. But in terms of the gravity of this offense, there's no greater offense in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania than third-degree murder with regard to the sentencing guidelines.
Well, before I let you go, there is a man claiming to be the child's biological father, and he says that he believes that the baby is his child, but the mother, Layla Soders, allegedly never allowed him to take a paternity test. Could he take one now that the baby is deceased?
Well, that's an interesting question. I guess that it would be possible to do that, you know, after the child's death. I'm not sure what purpose that would serve, other than, maybe putting him in a position to seek some sort of compensation for the death of the child. I mean, I'm not sure, but that would, as you well know, is not going to have any impact on how this case proceeds through the criminal justice system.
Right, absolutely.
Now, you know what, y'all? When she just said that, right? And then he says it wouldn't, I mean, what would it do? It wouldn't have no impact on the case, meaning they still going to charge him for what he did to the baby, right? But I'm thinking, did that father try to get a DNA before this happened to that baby? Okay. And she knew it was not this man's baby that did what he did. But the other man was trying to see that baby, get a DNA to prove that was his baby. And she didn't let him do that. I thought about this before I even aired this story. I said, you know what I'm saying? And maybe she told this guy too, it was his baby, and it really probably wasn't his baby. It could have been the other man baby, but she didn't give that man a chance to get a DNA to see if he was the baby. And I feel he still have a right for a DNA, even though the baby is gone. So that could bring him some justice, within his heart. You know what I'm saying? If that was his child, I feel like he still have a right to know that. And y'all just let me know in the comments what y'all think about it.
But you do bring up a good point there about, maybe if he was trying to get some type of compensation, which he, I'm trying to make clear, he never said that. He never posted anything about that. But technically, could he sue the mother for wrongful death?
He ain't gonna get nothing. The mama gonna be in jail the rest of her life. She have nothing.
I'm Sarah, and I'm an attorney here at Atticus. It's no secret that getting a
Yeah, he could do that. The question ultimately would be, what resources does she have if you were able to successfully sue her? I mean, it's one thing to sue a huge company. It's another thing to sue somebody who has insurance. It's another thing to sue somebody who might be going to jail for 20 to 40 years.
She ain't got nothing.
Right. Absolutely. Well, lastly, one last thing. Could anyone else be held liable if they knew about the alleged abuse? Like hypothetically, let's say Layla's mother and, the grandmother, if she potentially saw bruises or broken bones and didn't report anything, could she be held criminally liable as well?
Well, in Pennsylvania, we have what are called mandated reporters. So, a relative is not going to be a mandated reporter. So there's no legal obligation to do that. Now, let's say, for instance,
Mom Dukes, me neither. That's why I paused it and said what I said.
For a regular checkup, and there was some bruising, and that wasn't reported to the child line of Pennsylvania. That would be a different story. But or teachers. But again, we're dealing with
That's why I said what I said, Mom Dukes. You're right. I don't like the way he said that. You know what I'm saying? Because if that was the real father, the guy that tried to get the DNA, let him have some closure too. It ain't about suing. Who can he sue? He can't sue anyone because she's going to be in jail the rest of her life, and he is too. And then when I looked at him in his non-face coat right here, to be honest, y'all, in the beginning, I thought it was a woman. I ain't even gonna lie. Because the face, it was a face for me before I seen the whole body. I thought it was a woman. Okay? To be honest. But yeah, I don't like the way he said that. I mean, if that was that baby's father, he has a right for closure. Okay, meaning he has a right to be in that courtroom. Cause y'all, this trial haven't started yet. Okay, so I'm gonna try to keep up on this trial. This trial have not started yet. So this man will have a right to be in that courtroom. Okay, to see the justice go down for his daughter if that was his daughter?
4-month-old, so that's not going to be a factor. But no, the
Yes,
family
Mama
members,
Duke, his
neighbors
face. That's
have
what made me
no
look twice. I'm like,
real
wait a minute here.
responsibility legally to do anything like that.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Matt, for coming on today. This is a story that we will definitely be following. I appreciate it.
I'm gonna try. Y'all remind me
you,
too,
Ken.
y'all too.
A man claiming to be Ayani's biological father told local media that he is heartbroken about the infant's death. He claims that Layla Soders, the child's mother, would not let him be around the baby. Soders has not been given a bond and remains in jail. For Law and Crime, I'm Kennedy Walker.
I just said that. The man probably couldn't even come around the baby so he can get a DNA for the baby. I just said that. Yeah. Ain't that something? Ain't that something? Hold on, y'all. I have another story for y'all. But I just said that. So I feel like, let a DNA be taken. Let a DNA be taken, of the baby, so he can see if that is his baby. He's entitled to know if that's his child or not. If he had thoughts of that's his baby. I mean, I'm just saying, even though he probably ain't looking for no money or sue nobody, he just want to see if that's his child. I mean, come on. Okay, y'all. Ooh, Lord, this story right here, y'all. Ooh, God. Y'all, we gonna look at a judge that we thought was a judge, okay? That's going to jail for the rest of her life. So let's time into this story here. But the story, y'all, remind me to keep up with that story, y'all, because I definitely want to.
5 minutes away from getting Ozempic for weight loss.
Hold on, let me bring it up.
So this is Ozempic, and
this house belongs to the principal of Roosevelt.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Oh no, this
and
not
you're
the one.
Drunk as well.
I'm not drunk.
Yes, you are. I smell it.
Oh, you smell it.
No, this ain't the one. I don't want to see her. I looked at her story, right? She just pissed me off. When I watched her yesterday, y'all, she pissed me off so doggone bad. I said, I don't even want to share this with my people because she done pissed me off. I thought this was the one about the judge. Hold on, y'all. I'm going to find it. Yeah, get that man a right. Let that man know if that's his child. That man, like, how could you just do that to a baby? How could you kick a baby around, y'all? Kick a baby around. A 4-month-old baby, okay? A 4-month-old baby. How could you do that? I dare you. Wow. I just don't know. Some people just don't need kids. Okay, here it is right here. I tell you, boy. Some people just don't need children.
A shocking story out of Pennsylvania for you. A judge's boyfriend
Y'all,
tries
this is
to
another
end
one out
a
of
year-long
Pennsylvania.
relationship, tells her she has to move out. In response, she shot him in the head while he slept. Now, he miraculously survived the shooting and testified against her at trial. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Well, it didn't take very long for a jury in Pennsylvania to find former Harrisburg District Judge Sonia McKnight guilty of attempted murder. Yep, you heard me right.
Y'all, this is not her first time being charged with
and when her
crimes
boyfriend
like
at
this,
the time
okay?
insisted she move out of his home, she fired a gun at his head while he was in bed, possibly trying to stage things to look like a suicide. But that boyfriend, well, ex-boyfriend, Michael McCoy, lived to tell the tale.
Hey,
and
sometimes
he did so
you don't
on
know.
the witness stand. And we're
The
going to
law
get to
enforcement
that.
do more
Now, we first
criminal
told you
shit
about
than people that's not
55-year-old
law
Sonia
enforcement.
McKnight's arrest a little more than a year ago. In February 2024, McCoy, who had been in a romantic relationship with McKnight for about a year, wanted to end the relationship. So he asked her to move out of his home, but says she refused, even took away her key. But then you go to February 9th, and he came home to find her hanging out on his couch in her pajamas. According to McCoy, he left to go out to a restaurant, and when he came back, he told McKnight they'd talk about things in the morning. So he says he went to sleep at around 11 p.m. that night, but then wakes up a few hours later in incredible pain. He was blinded, unable to see, but says he could hear McKnight asking, "Mike, what did you do to yourself?" Well, turns out McCoy had a gunshot wound near his right eye. He was rushed to the hospital, told EMTs, though, he didn't shoot himself, was not suicidal, and if at any point his heart stopped or he stopped breathing, he told the medical staff, "Save me." Now, the only other person in that home that evening was McKnight. Now, police say she called 911 to tell them she heard her boyfriend screaming but didn't know what happened. The problem for McKnight was, police quickly started uncovering clues in the home. The gun used in the shooting was owned by McKnight. Investigators found gunshot residue on her hand and clothes. And police say they caught McKnight in lies. For example, she told detectives that she didn't leave the house that night, but surveillance footage from neighbors proved that wasn't the case.
Yeah, we got the statues. Yeah, pulling up now.
Sorry to do this, but rush delivery is
Like telling her to go home, and she would not go home to her own house.
What if your smile could go from looking like this to this?
Nuvia's 24-hour process is really unique.
It's a game changer in terms of having your teeth in that.
McKnight was arrested and released on $300,000 bail, and her trial started more than a year later, and that is what we're going to talk about. But to get into some more of the evidence, this case, I'm not just bringing on an attorney. No. I'm going to bring on, for a judge who was convicted of acting quite badly, I'm bringing on right now Judge Brandon Birmingham out of Texas.
Exactly,
Judge, my goodness, so good to see you. It is not often we hear of someone in your line of work arrested and charged, but let alone accused of trying to kill someone. Your reaction to that?
Well, it was shocking to say the least. Just as you said, every now and then you'll hear about a judge getting in trouble, but for this kind of trouble, attempted murder, handgun to the face, trying to cover it up, lying to the police officers, her story unravels. It was quite a shocking tale.
By the way, we'll get into this a little bit more about her, other prior bad acts. We'll get into that. But generally speaking, if a judge gets convicted of a crime, attempted murder, what happens to all those cases that they presided over? Anything?
Well, all of those cases are going to be reviewed. Certainly, the lawyers that represented the clients are going to have an opportunity to look, and they can file post-conviction writs if they think something untoward has happened, especially around the time frame that this crime happened. If she was making big decisions, lawyers in those cases are going to be reviewing them to see if there was anything they can point to in the record to say, she wasn't acting right or she didn't rule in the right way on these particular occasions.
Why she mess up?
Okay, so let's talk about this trial now. Because of McKnight's prominence as a judge in the community, apparently a prosecutor from Cumberland County prosecuted the case to avoid any conflict of interest. And a jury was actually bussed in from nearby Delaware County. Judge, not surprised by that, but that's an issue in of itself, right? Having a judge on trial, it seems like they tried to take whatever safeguards were possible to make sure there wasn't a conflict or that she got a fair and impartial jury.
Yeah, I think this case is a good illustration of how the process can work and is flexible. It's obviously unusual to have a judge on trial, but we do have processes in place to make sure that the appearance of impropriety doesn't exist in a trial, and that we have a jury pool that is less likely to be influenced by the fact that the person is a judge or is less likely to know the judge. After all, that a judge is somewhat a public figure. And so you take that away. And I think this case is a good illustration of also having a neutral prosecutor. Obviously, there's going to be the appearance of impropriety potentially for the same prosecutor in the same district to be prosecuting a judge that prosecutor's probably appeared in front of. And so we have a good illustration of how the process can work independently. And in this case, I don't think that any of the questions about this trial have had to do with that process. And that's a good thing.
Hey, real quick, I want to thank our incredible new sponsor, Experian, for sponsoring Sidebar. Now, this is big because Experian can help you stay on top of your finances. After all, April is Financial Literacy Month, but he didn't description or scan the QR code to download the free app now. Days of testimony. So, according to reporting from Penn Live, the prosecution argued that there were only two people in the home, McCoy and McKnight. And McCoy insisted he didn't shoot himself. So that left McKnight as the shooter, right? The defense argued, though, just because McKnight was the only other person in the house didn't prove that she did it. There's possibly reasonable doubt there. And on the first day after opening statements, 17 witnesses were called. Most of them were police officers, others were first responders who were at McCoy's home. And Penn Live reports that multiple officers say that they heard McCoy state multiple times he was not trying to kill himself. He was not suicidal. Now, Judge, having just one witness report about what someone said is one thing, but to have multiple witnesses corroborate that information, I imagine, is critical. By the way, how is there not a hearsay issue? Like they're overhearing what he said. Is there a hearsay issue at all?
There can be. There's also a number.
Today, you didn't just see your gyno. You saw
The
every
whole job
resident.
is just going down the drain.
But hey, at least your shave is smooth. Shake Hydrosilk has 5 curve sensing blades that follow your body, even your knee. They're smooth, then there's Shake Hydrosilk.
You might not realize that you could qualify for disability benefits.
I guess
the
nowadays
program
it
is
doesn't matter
designed
what
for
type of job
anyone
you
who is
got.
unable to
You
work
just
because of a medical
definitely
condition.
off the
And it comes
chain.
with serious benefits. Free
Did I put it on pause?
Of exceptions to the hearsay rule that apply when somebody is making excited utterances. In other words, saying something in an excited state, that may be one exception. If they're giving their state of mind or their feelings of pain or fear or anxiety, that's another exception that can be used. And then there's another one called present sense impression. So there's ways to get around that, and all of those really relate to the state of mind of the victim in this case and what was going on in his mind at the time immediately after this crime had apparently occurred. And those are vitally important statements that obviously swayed the jury. And I think that was one of the key parts of this case.
And I'll get to the verdict, but it's interesting when you hear about this, because if this was a situation where he tried to harm himself, right? You've seen cases in the past where someone does try to do it, and then afterwards it's like, no, save my life, I regret this. It wasn't necessarily that's what. That's not. I can't imagine that in and of itself was the reason she was found guilty, right? Because there could be situations where somebody does try self-harm, but they may reverse course after it's attempted. So that only went so far for the prosecution, right?
Sure, and that's one thing that you would consider one of the circumstances in this case. I think the two biggest problems that she had are, number one, her prior involvement with him. As you said at the top, he came home and she was in his house and she wasn't supposed to be there. Yeah. And so that history is pretty important. And I think the other thing that's really important is that anytime a person accused of a crime is caught making untruthful statements, that usually is a good circumstance against them for a guilty verdict that the jurors will use. And we had some of that in this case.
Let's go to another aspect of this, and I think this is really important. So the forensic scientists also testified about the results of their tests, and both McKnight and McCoy had gunshot residue on them after the shooting. Now, the defense noted that there was more residue found on McCoy rather than on McKnight, according to the tests, but one witness testified that McKnight had washed her hands at least once before her hands were tested for any residue. Now, Judge, sometimes testimony from experts can be confusing for juries, especially when you have forensic experts get down into the nitty-gritty of how their testing works. But why is it so important for them to basically, show their work to jurors, not just give their conclusion? What do you think this impact had on the jury?
Jurors are always going to be looking for physical evidence. They know and they're told and they expect that when a person fires a gun, that there's the potential that gunshot residue might be on their hand. The expert would also say that just because you have gunshot residue on your hand, that doesn't mean necessarily you fired it, but it could mean that you were in close proximity to it. So that may explain the gunshot residue, but it goes back to those statements that you make. Insofar as somebody's caught in a lie, that's usually a piece of evidence against them. The same thing is if they're covering up evidence, and certainly somebody in her position is going to be familiar with gunshot residue.
Right.
They know how it works, at least have a working knowledge of it. And so she's going to know, and jurors are thinking, man, she knows how this process works. And now she's in there washing her hands twice. That looks pretty bad.
Even if she didn't have an understanding of gunshot residue, she knows how evidence works. She knows the rules of evidence, right? She knows, and I have to say, look, I'll be the first to tell you, Judge. Sometimes I look at judges and we forget that they're real people, right? They're held to this position, they're held to the standard, rightfully so. It's an incredible position to have. It's a privilege to have, and I sometimes forget that they're human beings, and it makes me wonder, what she did here, the surveillance footage, lying, the 911 call. And I'll tell you this, one of the police officers testified that she dropped some sort of article of clothing that was supposed to be turned over to investigators into a toilet at the police station. So now you're talking about, again, potentially tampering with evidence, not a good look. But it makes me wonder, how did she think she was going to get away with this?
Facts.
Let me guess. You're thinking about going to therapy. And as a therapist myself, of course I'm going to say that's a great idea. But first, let's talk about the things they don't tell you.
Yeah, Judge. That's for sure.
I ask myself that question quite frequently in my line of work. I think it's probably stems from something being short-sighted. It's probably stems from arrogance, probably stems from self-preservation. You commit the crime and you try to get away with it. You don't anticipate all of the problems, and so you got to cover up, man. And that's, man, oh man, my courtroom is full of stories like that.
Exactly, Brittany.
So Mr. McCoy took the stand during the trial. This is big, okay? Now, he had told the jurors that he had been asking McKnight to leave his home every day for a week, and she ignored him. And on the night of the shooting, the last thing that he remembers is McKnight saying to him before he went to bed in the guest bedroom, "Oh, so you're serious?" And McCoy testified that when he woke up in searing pain, he thought he was actually having some sort of aneurysm. He didn't even realize he'd been shot until a paramedic told him. This shooting left him blind in one eye. He's already had 2 major surgeries. An ophthalmologist testified that McCoy would need medical treatment for the rest of his life to maintain the eyesight that he has left. Wow. And he told the jurors that when McKnight responded to his screams, he had to ask her to call 911, and she didn't do it right away. And she then, according to him, led him to the furthest bathroom on the 2nd floor of the house. So, Judge, really, really bad testimony. You don't always get a surviving, you don't get a victim to testify, a surviving victim testifying. It's unbelievable. And in this state, to recount what happened is very, very powerful evidence, no?
Absolutely. This is through no fault of her own, not a murder case. She tried her very best to make it a murder case. That's what the attempted murder charge is. And, had he succumbed to his injuries, we never would have known about that final statement that she made. "Oh, now you're serious." And boy, once you put it in context with her prior conduct and what we know now happened, it seems like that's the moment in time that maybe she decided what she was going to do. She probably considered it some time before. Obviously, she had the weapon, but maybe that was the moment in time when she realized this relationship is truly over. And that's when I want to use the word snapped. That's when she decided that she was going to commit this crime. And what a chilling piece of testimony that only comes because he survived.
And I imagine the jury seeing him in this state, learning more about his condition, that helps. That helps the credibility aspect of him, right?
It's going to help the court craft the sentence as well. This permanent physical disfigurement and permanent injury is going to be a permanent reminder for the victim for the rest of his life. And that's going to have an impact on what the sentence is and the outcome of this case.
Oh, absolutely. And it's incredible. And it's a miracle he's alive after something like this. So the idea is, not only did she shoot him, not only did she make it clear that she wasn't trying to save him, make sure paramedics wouldn't get there as quickly as possible. But here's the thing. During his testimony, McCoy admitted he didn't actually see who shot him. He said, I can't say who it was. I was blind, but I can tell you who was in that house prior to me going to sleep. The only other person in that house was Sonia McKnight. And once the jury got the case, they didn't deliberate very long. Within 2 hours, they convicted McKnight of attempted murder and aggravated assault. Now, Judge, you think the jury got it right in the end? Did the prosecution prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt?
This is a wonderful example of a circumstantial evidence case because we don't have any direct evidence about who actually pulled the trigger. The circumstances before the crime, this souring relationship, the character of the defendant, and then the lies that she told and the cover-ups that she tried to make afterwards all convinced this jury beyond a reasonable doubt that she's the one that did the crime.
By the way, it was interesting they charged her not only with attempted murder, but assault. So in other words, if the jury wouldn't believe this was murder, attempted murder, they could at least get her for the assault charge, right?
Yeah, assault charge, intent to commit assault or cause serious bodily injury is a lesser charge of attempting to commit murder, at least in some jurisdictions. And really, it's all about punishment. But the jurors are going to look at the location of the wounds. They're going to look at the type of weapon used, how far away was the weapon, and what was the victim doing during the time that the weapon was used. And all of those things would indicate that she had murder on her mind when she walked into that bedroom.
You mentioned punishment. Let's talk about that. So according to Penn Live reporters that were in the courtroom when the verdict was read, McCoy bowed his head. McKnight didn't have any kind of reaction. The judge deemed she's a flight risk, raised her bail to $3 million. Sheriff deputies took her into custody, led her from the courtroom in handcuffs. And McKnight reportedly faces between 30 to 60 years in prison when she's sentenced in May. By all accounts, she's going to have to serve her sentence at STI Muncie, the only prison in Pennsylvania that houses women. Judge, what's she looking at? What kind of punishment you think?
Yeah, she feel real dumb. She feel real dumb, Brittany.
Do you hear that? The pure panic of a cyber attack.
Nice home.
The endless alerts of component failure and power loss.
You wasn't even
Can you hear
married
it?
to the man.
Neither can we.
And if you was, that still wasn't worth it. I mean, the man asked you to leave. You should have just left. That was his house, not your house. You want the relationship to be over. Okay. Evidently,
she's looking at,
evidently, this man already seen some toxic behavior within her, right? And he probably was tired of dealing with it, right? So he said, enough is enough. He asked her to give him his keys and to leave. That was it. And that's what she should have did. So we see her as a judge. She can't take rejection either. Okay? She can't take rejection because if she could, she would have gave the man the keys and she would have left. Okay? Y'all was just boyfriend and girlfriends. Y'all wasn't married. You didn't have no kids together. It wasn't your home. That was his home. You had your own home. You should have thought about your livelihood, all of that before you made a stupid decision like that. You know what I'm saying? Went home, you probably would have grieved a little minute, you know what I'm saying, with your little depression or whatever. If you need to take time off from work, take time off from work, but you would have still had your job. You would have still had your job. You would have still had your freedom. But now you have nothing. You lost everything. And it wasn't worth it.
30 to 60 years. And, I'm not 100% familiar with the statutory scheme there, but I do know that there are certain aggravating factors that a court will take into consideration in a punishment phase, as well as certain mitigating factors. And that's what all punishment phases are about. It helps that in her life, she's led a good life. She hasn't ever been convicted of a felony before. And so she has a lack of criminal history that would warrant some mitigation. On the other hand, this seems to be a premeditated crime of defenseless person that was extraordinarily violent, and she tried to lie and to cover it up. And so that's going to hurt her in that analysis.
I am curious if something that might hurt her is her past. What do I mean by that? So this apparently is not the first time that former Judge McKnight has been in trouble. It's not even the first time she was accused of shooting a lover. So at the time of her arrest, she was actually suspended from the bench without pay. There were claims that she violated judicial probation in a misconduct case in 2020 when she allegedly got involved in a traffic stop with her son. She was acquitted of criminal charges but remained suspended. According to the District Conduct Board of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, McKnight violated 7 different rules governing standards of conduct of magisterial district judges. Those violations included theft of time when she allowed employees to take extra vacation days. She also allegedly told her office manager to pretend she never received a civil complaint regarding a loan that she owed. 2019, by the way, McKnight was investigated for shooting her estranged husband in the groin. Prosecutors didn't file charges. They said it was self-defense. But Judge, can any of that come into her sentencing?
In jurisdictions like Texas, the answer is yes. We're pretty wide open. Some jurisdictions have, sentencing guidelines that they've got to follow. I will say that if somebody's acquitted of a crime, that usually is not admissible in a punishment phase because they've been acquitted of the conduct, even if the conduct was justified. And I believe that in the case of the shooting of her former, I guess it was her ex-husband.
Yes.
That was a justified shooting, according to the news reports that I read. So that probably won't come in. But, the allegations of official misconduct, if the state can prove that beyond a reasonable doubt in the punishment phase, and it's something under Pennsylvania law that will allow for an enhanced sentencing, then yeah, the answer is yes. It comes in, as a judge friend of mine used to say, it comes in like a freight train.
You got to ask this. You got to answer this for me. What goes into a judge getting on the bench? I mean, what is the background check?
This is a judge here, y'all, but he's out in Texas, and she's from Pennsylvania. And all law enforcement, they like brothers and sisters. You know what I'm saying? So he was in shock that she did what she did. But her ex-husband, she did the same thing with him, but she got away with it because they dropped the charges and everything because they said it was self-defense. Now, like this guy saying, they may not look at it as self-defense now and put that together with this and give her harsh time, because they may look at it as though like, oh, well, this happened to her ex-husband. She might have did that on purpose too. You know what I'm saying? So now they can't use that against her now, but they can definitely go back and they can look at that and think about that to how that they feel like they want to sentence her. It sounds like this judge was unhinged in her life.
Check process. What is there a psychological evaluation? When I see what she is now convicted of, obviously, I say this in a lot of different cases about law enforcement acting badly, teachers acting badly. Definitely. Hindsight's 2020. Nobody has a crystal ball, but you got to tell me. I mean, look, you may know this better than me. I don't see cases every 5 seconds about judges being arrested and convicted of crimes, let alone attempted murder. There has to be there's some sort of review process, right? Unless I know it's not foolproof, but when you hear a judge getting involved in this stuff, what does it take for a judge to get on the bench?
Well, this is an interesting question. It's different in every state. In Texas, we're simply elected. You have to have been an attorney for 5 years, and you are elected in popular elections. Other states are appointed by the governor's office. Some states have retention elections. Always going to be some minimum qualifications about your legal standard and have a good law license and all of those things, but there's no like mental health evaluation or anything like that. I think really maybe what this case illustrates is that judges are, as you said at the very beginning of this segment, judges are human beings, and some apples are bad, and we can unfortunately see how those apples have spoiled in this case. And that's the same for any profession. Lawyers, teachers, anytime there's humans involved, there's human error. And this case is a good example of it. Judges are humans. We're not special. We're not omniscient. We won elections or we got appointed, and that's basically the only thing that qualifies us. And there's nothing more than that.
I talked to members of law enforcement about cases of law enforcement members being charged with crimes, committed of misconduct, accused of misconduct. I imagine, and this is what they say, the people who want to hold the members of law enforcement, members of authority accountable more than anybody else are the members of law enforcement. They take offense to it. They get more angry than anybody else. When you see a case like this, does it make you angry?
Yeah, I feel like all my judges all across the country are my brothers and sisters. They're my colleagues, and we're committed to making sure that our process is safe, and to anything that would impugn the process we dislike. And this is certainly something that disparages the judiciary as a whole, and that's tough to take. Tough to take.
Judge Brandon Birmingham, great seeing you. One of the best judges we know, and so happy that you have you came here and talked to us about it. Really, it's a disturbing case, but I'm
like
happy
he just
you
said,
had
they
a
don't
chance
take
to talk
mental
about it.
evaluations
Yes,
or any
sir.
of that.
Thank you very much. Look forward to seeing you again.
All right, everybody, that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Thank you so much for joining us, and as always,
yeah, they don't do that to become a judge. You just have to make sure you've been a lawyer for 5 years and so forth, so on. So this lady clearly had a mental issue. She can't keep no man. It's always something a man did to her, you know. So we can clearly see that. Okay, we can clearly see she's a liar. We can clearly see that she's an abuser. We can clearly see she's a manipulator. Okay, and I can go on and on and on with this lady. Sad. So let me get my other story up here. But she won't get away with this one. Yes, you know what? Yes. I agree with you. I agree with you, Brittany. I definitely agree with you. Yeah. Somewhere in her life, she wasn't loved. Maybe it could have been her dad. She didn't get the love from her dad. You know, so every man came into her life, she felt like she was going to be be abusive to them. You know what I'm saying? She didn't get that daddy love. That's where it had to come from. You know, her dad probably wasn't in her life. You know, and she didn't get that love. So she felt like, okay, I'm going to treat these men the way I want to treat them because my dad wasn't in my life, or my dad could have been in my life, but still abused me to some point. You know what I'm saying? So she took it out on these men. I can definitely agree with that. Yep, I definitely agree with that.
We did recover the remains.
All right, let me know if y'all
missing
can hear
12-year-old Lori Page.
A missing little girl has been found dead. Her name was Lori Page, and she was only 12 years old. She disappeared without a trace. Her father was the one who first reported her missing, but now that same man is behind bars, charged with her murder.
I told you 2 years ago that we would find who did this, and we would arrest them and bring them to justice. And today, I stand before you to tell you we have done just that.
Now Lori can rest in peace, and the man accused of stealing her
But
young
these
life
folks, I don't
is
know.
sitting in a jail cell. I'm Kennedy Walker, and I'll walk you through the details.
Good
You may be
question.
asking, how does a story like this begin? How does a father go from searching for his daughter to being accused of taking her life? To find those answers, we have to go back to Tallahassee, Florida. It's summer, June 3rd, 2023. The sun is out, kids are playing, and somewhere in the middle of it all, a little girl named Lori vanished. Her father, Andrew Wiley, was the one who called police. He claimed that Lori left home sometime overnight with her backpack while he was at work. But behind the scenes, investigators say his story did not sit right, and over time, it only got worse. Within the first year of her disappearance, detectives still had no sign of Lori, and Wiley's version of events were allegedly starting to fall apart. According to the Tallahassee Democrat, Lori had been living a troubled life long before she went missing. A teacher described her as kind, intelligent, and attentive in class. But behind her good grades and polite smile was a quiet sadness. A school paraprofessional told the paper that Lori had previously been in custody of the Department of Children and Families. In just 1 month before she disappeared, she reportedly ran away from home. She was later found at an apartment complex pool. One teacher reportedly recalled one time Lori showed up to school barefoot. Her father was called, and he came to get her. When Lori disappeared, it rattled the community. Search efforts kicked into high gear, but still no trace. Month after month passed. The FBI even offered a $15,000 reward for any information that might bring her home. They knocked on doors across 3 different states where Lori had family. They brought in cadaver dogs, but still nothing. 8 months into the search, and the Tallahassee Police Department launched a grid search. That means investigators methodically comb through a large stretch of land, one section at a time. Dozens of officers and firefighters joined the effort. It was the 5th time they'd searched that same area, but this time they had more hands. Police said there were a few unique challenges in Lori's case. Like, she only lived in Tallahassee for about a year, so she hadn't formed many routines or relationships that could help detectives. Next, she vanished during the summer, which meant no school patterns to track. And perhaps the most difficult obstacle, she didn't have a cell phone. So that means no digital footprint, no pings, and no social media. But then everything changed.
We have recovered Lori's remains, and we have arrested the person responsible.
12-year-old Lori Page had been found. She was dead, and the person accused of killing her was her own father.
After a comprehensive and exhaustive 22-month investigation into the disappearance of 12-year-old Lori Page, the Tallahassee Police Department has arrested her father, 36-year-old Andrew Wiley, on the charges of second-degree murder.
Police say the case cracked open as Wiley's story continued to shift. And then key developments that investigators say changed everything. Listen to what Chief Lawrence Revel describes as key developments which ultimately led to Wiley's arrest.
February 2nd, 2024, a phone is seized from Wiley's residence. A forensic analysis uncovers questionable internet searches, including queries about remote areas with bodies of water in Alabama and Georgia. March 2024, as more consistencies in Wiley's statements are identified and new information about his relationship with Lori emerges, detectives shift their focus more heavily towards Wiley. Early 2024, based on digital evidence, detectives begin searching a remote, brush-covered area of Thomas County, Georgia, known locally as a plantation. Multiple searches are conducted, but yield no results. April 5th, 2025, following a prescribed burn that cleared heavy brush in the area, detectives returned to the plantation for another search. This time, they located human remains. The remains are processed by the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, again, like I said, in 4 days, and positively.
Moving in, but the place isn't quite move-in ready? Don't take slow for an answer. Get Optimum Fiber Internet starting at $40 a month. Make the move to the fastest fiber internet. Plus, get a 5-year price lock and a $400 prepaid MasterCard on us. Click now.
Hold on, y'all. Let me get it off. I've been wanting to share this story, but I had forgot.
How do we price SEO services? What I'm going to share with you today is the exact breakdown that we use. In fact, I did a pitch and
positively identified as those of Lori Page.
I want to thank Odoo for sponsoring this news package. Odoo is an incredible all-in-one business management software that provides you with a range of applications. One of my favorite Odoo applications is their Projects app. Managing projects can be tough, but with Odoo's Projects app, it truly does not have to be. Need a clear to done.
Okay.
Evidence suggests there may have been abuse, potentially of a sexual nature. Wiley is also accused of destroying his electronic devices to cover his tracks. Then, in February 2024, police brought him back in for questioning. When they asked him about the week Lori vanished, he reportedly said he could not remember. That same month, investigators searched Wiley's vehicle. They found a pistol, ammunition, and a bottle of cleaning fluid, one that specifically claimed it could clean or remove blood. The vehicle's carpet was sent to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement Crime Lab. It tested positive for Lori Page's blood. But the court documents did not stop there. They painted a heartbreaking picture of Lori's young life. Records show Lori experienced deep depression. She reportedly resented her parents, possibly for what she endured at home. Documents claim she was often left alone for hours at a time in both of her parents' homes without supervision. Originally, Lori's parents shared custody, but prior to the 2022-23 school year, her mother gave up custody. From that point on, Lori lived solely with her father. And less than a year later, she was gone. Now, as Andrew Wiley sits behind bars accused of murdering his own daughter, his family is fighting back. They've launched a GoFundMe page claiming he's been falsely accused. They're trying to raise $100,000 for his legal defense. At the time of this recording, they've raised just $50. And joining me to talk more about this is legal expert Melba Pearson. Melba, thank you so much for coming on today. Let's dive right in. What does a second-degree murder charge typically mean in a case like this?
Yeah, so great to be on with you as always, Kennedy. And so this is a case out of the state of Florida. And so second degree murder in the state of Florida usually means that, number one, there was no premeditation. And so with the lack of premeditation, that's what brings it down to second degree murder versus first degree premeditated murder. Now, this also could mean that it was a reckless act of some sort. It could also mean heat of passion. So in other words, you did not intend to kill someone, but obviously whether it be,
I don't know if
again, we don't know what the autopsy will say in terms of what injuries the poor child sustained, but was it a matter of a beating that resulted in death or something along those lines? Those are all types of actions that would result in a second degree murder charge. It still would be facing life in prison, and there's also enhancers because of the fact that it is a child that is involved. The child is a victim, but again, we're looking at life in prison. This is not a death penalty type of case in the state of Florida.
And I know we're waiting on the young girl's autopsy, but how does the prosecution potentially prove intent without a direct witness?
Well, it's going to have to be looking at circumstantial evidence as well as digital evidence and the physical evidence that will be gleaned from the victim's body. So number one, looking at the injuries. Was it, and again, I do not like to be morbid about this sort of thing, but was it strangulation? Was it a beating? All of that can kind of, the body will tell the story generally as to what happened. Was there a pattern of abuse? And that's something that the prosecution will be looking at. Has there been prior police calls to the residents, as do the fellow classmates, or does the teachers at the child's school have some input in terms of they saw her with bruises or something along those lines? That kind of evidence is going to be very important. Also the digital evidence. So looking at, and one of the things that became very critical in making this arrest was his internet searches, where he was looking for wooded areas and places to hide a body. That's going to be incredibly critical. What other things was he searching for? Is this a situation where he wanted to start his life over without his child? You could be looking at some, let's say if he has a girlfriend or a partner or boyfriend, something in another city or whatever the case may be, and there's correspondence back and forth, and there was a, deadline of, hey, I need you to start a life with me by Friday or else. We've seen cases like that before. Did the homicide ended up happening during that time frame? So again, lots of speculation here, but these are some of the examples of the types of evidence that the prosecution will be looking for to help bolster their case.
Can you walk us through what happens legally once human remains are positively identified?
Well, first off, there would have to be a notification made to the surviving family members. Even though the defendant is the father arrested in this case, there still may be a mother that's alive. There still may be other relatives that would want to know what happened to their loved one. So that would be the first thing. And then once the remains have been identified, then the remains then get turned over to the coroner's office, the medical examiner, where they're going to conduct an autopsy. And
if you've been waiting to apply for disability benefits, don't. Hi, I'm Sarah, and I'm a lawyer at Atticus. Applying as soon as you're unable to work or struggling to work due to your medical condition can really help strengthen your case. The process takes time, but winning benefits is life-changing for so many of our clients. The average disability check is worth about $1,500 a month, but some people receive up to $30.
Figure out what the cause of death is. Now, there is a possibility, depending on how long the remains were hidden and the types of conditions. So was it really hot? Was it very swampy? That, of course, contributes to decomposition, which sometimes makes it harder to determine what the cause of death is.
Yeah.
But again, you may be able to see based on the bones, based on, the toxicology report. Let's say, was there something in the child's blood that could be indicative of how they died? All of those things will be analyzed. So once the autopsy is complete, then the prosecution can then move forward in determining what the theory of the case is going to be, and then continue to work with law enforcement to get the relevant evidence that will be needed in order to move the case forward.
Now, I know you're not a coroner, but realistically, would they be able to find all of those things if the body, it's been 2 years since anyone last saw her?
Again, it depends on the condition of her body. It also depends on when she was left there. Again, if it may have been 2 years, but maybe she was not in that same location the entire 2 years. We don't know. So there's possibility that if she had been in a different location, that may have slowed decomposition down. That's a possibility. But if not, and if decomposition sadly did set in, again, if there are some tissue samples that are left, that can be tested to get some idea as to what was going on with her body at the time of the homicide. And then again, if, in terms of, let's say, strangulation, if there's at least some bones in her neck that are still intact, that might be able to show if she was strangled. So, again, there's different options available, but again, it's all going to depend on what condition her body was when she was found.
Now, let's, move on to the digital forensics. According to court documents, police are claiming that there were internet searches, phone records that they used, and that's how they were able to, accuse the father of this crime. How important are the digital forensics in this modern day investigation?
Listen, forensics are everything at this point. Digital forensics are everything. Your internet searches and your phone will tell on you.
I believe that.
All right, this feels almost illegal to know, but our windows were so old and just desperately needed to be replaced. So I called a few contractors, but they all quoted me a hefty $10,000 or more for new windows, and I almost lost it. That's when my friend, who's a realtor, stopped me and said, if you're a homeowner and your windows are older than 5 years, you might qualify for this new 2025 window replacement service. At first,
they get on my nerve, these commercials.
Siri is very quick to tell on you. And so people often think, oh, if I just turn off my phone, I'm not going to be able to be tracked. But there's other ways that you can be tracked. Also, again, if you're searching how to get it with murder, how, what sorts of places should I leave a body, things like that. Well, that's clearly showing your state of mind and that this is something that you planned. Maybe the homicide wasn't planned, but the hiding of the body afterwards is clearly being planned. So all of that's going to be critical. And then, of course, your social media footprint. Are you posting with your child? Or, for instance, if during the time that your child was missing, how often did you post on social media appealing for information, things like that? If you weren't very vocal and visible in this investigation in trying to find your child, why is that? So all of those things will be critical pieces for the jury to understand what happened in the days leading up to the poor child's disappearance, and then subsequently during the time that she was missing for those 2 years.
And police claim that the suspect made internet searches, allegedly searching things about remote areas with large bodies of water. Can internet searches alone be used as evidence in court? And if so, can't the defense just come back and say that he was looking for something else?
Absolutely. And that's why you all the evidence comes together, almost like making a cake, right? Like you can't just have one ingredient and think you're going to have a great end result. It takes a number of different ingredients. So you would have the medical examiner's report. You would have the lead detective talking about the investigation they conducted. You would have the digital expert looking at the searches and trying to explain the time frames and how that matched up. You would be looking for school records and hospital records to see if there's a history of abuse, things like that. So I would not let my case rise and fall solely just on the digital evidence, but it can play a critical role in moving the case forward.
What challenges do investigators face when remains are found so long after the death?
Again, it goes back to the ability of the medical examiner to determine the cause of death. The worst finding you could get is basically undetermined. Because at that point, when the coroner makes the finding, and we use the term coroner and medical examiner interchangeably, means the same thing. But when you do get that finding of undetermined, that means the defense can say, oh, it wasn't a homicide, it was an accident. And then the prosecution has an uphill battle to have to show how beyond a reasonable doubt that this was a homicide. So the decomposition becomes very much a problem. And of course, again, hate to be morbid, but if you're left in a wooded area, you have to worry about wildlife and your remains being scattered that way. And so if you don't have the body intact, key evidence ends up getting lost. So it makes it harder to necessarily pin down what the cause of death is.
Yeah, such a tragic story. We know that, according to the court documents, again, police claim to have found cleaning products in the suspect's car. Allegedly, those cleaning products could be used to clean blood. That's what they were for. Can cleaning products be considered incriminating evidence?
It can. But again, not in a vacuum. It has to be part of the broader investigation and part of the broader story as to how all of this came to be. So again, if it's a situation where it's the day that the child went missing is when we believe that the homicide occurred, well, then we'll be backtracking from there to see what happened during that time frame. Did he go to a big box store and buy all of these cleaning supplies and a tarp as well? I mean, all of these things become factors in terms of figuring out what happened and explaining the chronology and explaining the child's last days on this earth.
Let me guess. You're thinking about going to therapy. And as a therapist myself, of course I'm going to say that's a great idea.
This is what you're going to do.
Let's talk about
your child. If you, I just feel like,
now police say that
if you did not want your child, why did you get your child? Why did you let someone else in the family get your child? Okay, evidently, if the mother did not want custody of the child anymore, you took custody of the child. It was something going on with the mother, right? But then as the father, you're going to accept the child into your life, okay, into your home to abuse her, to unalive her. So why didn't you just let her go to someone else? Why you couldn't be truthful and say you wasn't in the right state of mind to keep her neither? Okay, she can be here today. She lost her life in the hands of her dad that's supposed to care for her, loved her, protected her, everything. And you felt her. It's just sad. And then you're going to lie about everything.
That they interviewed the father several times. Why would someone be re-interviewed months later? And what's the legal strategy behind that?
Exactly, Panda.
Well,
evil.
First of all, you get interviewed initially when there's an issue, a criminal act, or you're reporting someone missing. There's always an initial interview. But then subsequent interviews become necessary because as the investigation progresses, new facts may come to light, new questions may come to light. And so as a result of that, you go back and you go to the father and say, okay, well, we heard that the child was seen here, or we heard that there was some abuse. Can you answer this? Can you explain what color the backpack was, or something along those lines? Was something recovered along the way? Then you want to go back to the family member and find out, can you identify this? Did this belong to the victim? Is it in the same condition that it was when it left the house? That sort of thing, because all of that again will play a role in determining was what happened along the way. So that is not unusual. Now, of course, if your story starts to change, that of course raises an alert with law enforcement, because again, the truth never changes. The truth is the truth is the truth. So if your story keeps shifting, then they're going to keep re-interviewing you, because now you're getting caught in lies repeatedly, and they want to know, why are you lying? What do you have to hide? And so they're going to keep coming back to you, especially as more facts and more evidence come to light, and keep locking you into that story, so that eventually when you end up getting arrested and going to trial, now you have a multitude of different scenarios that you've presented. And of course the prosecution can say, well, what part is the truth? Was it the initial story? Was it the third story? Or is it what you're saying in court today? That becomes a very classic impeachment tactic during the course of trial.
Yeah, and speaking of that, investigators did say that the suspect's story had inconsistencies. But I guess my question to you would be, if his daughter did go missing 2 years ago, is that normal to not remember exactly what you told the police a couple years prior? Or in a situation like this, it's hard to believe that someone with a missing child would forget certain details?
Well, again, it depends on which details. So if it's something relatively minor, as in maybe your time frame was off by 5 or 10 minutes, okay, that's something that could be explained. But if now we're looking at a situation where you're saying, well, I was on this part of town, and then now you come back and you're saying, actually, I was someplace else, that starts to look suspect. That starts to look sketchy. So it depends on the type of details that have somewhat changed. And of course, when you think about the loss of a child, that's usually an event that's very much seared in your memory. So a lot of things, at least in, common sense, would say certain things would be almost like frozen in time, as in the last time you saw them, you're always going to remember that and try to keep that moment fresh in your mind, because again, as you're grieving, you're going to be looking back to that moment of, was there something I missed? Was there something else I should have done? Was there any signs? Or did my child say something that I just blew off and could have done something differently? I mean, a lot of times you see family members of folks that have gone missing, folks that have been, let's say murdered as a result of domestic violence. They keep playing the tape back in their head to figure out if there was something they could have done differently, and sometimes often beating themselves up about it. So clearly this was missing here. And so those are the types of things that investigators would be looking for.
Apartment 2B?
2B. She's definitely using that Grubhub deal from Amazon.
Oh, yeah.
And so next, let's switch gears to the defense. How does the defense typically counter digital and forensic evidence like this?
Of course, they're going to say that there may be another explanation for why you're searching for those things, that you're in school and you were researching a project, or you saw something online crime and you decided to Google it, or something along those lines. And they're going to say that, clearly this doesn't show that the person's a murderer. And of course, they'll try to say that maybe they're not the only person that has access to that particular device. Now, that can become difficult, especially if you're the only one who lives in the house. But if this was, multiple people living in the household, sometimes you end up, blaming one of the kids or something like that to say, hey, I'm not the only person that has access to the search engine. And now you have to kind of dig deeper into timeframes and use that to corroborate whether or not it was the defendant that was looking, or if it could in fact be someone else.
Is there a chance that his defense team could argue wrongful arrest or, even mishandled evidence?
Of course, defense can argue anything they want. Doesn't mean it's going to be effective, but they can definitely argue that, well, this was a rush to judgment and, the police department couldn't find any other suspects. So they went back to the father who, had reported his child missing. If he was really a murderer, would he have reported his child missing at all? He probably wouldn't have said anything. Those types of arguments would be normal to see in this type of case.
Now, there was a report saying that the family allegedly had a case, or, little Lori Page had a case with the Department of Children and Families. How could prior involvement with the Department of Children and Families affect this?
Well, it could be very telling as to why DCF, Department of Children and Families, got involved. It was there, again, allegations of abuse? Was there allegations of the child was starving, going to school dirty, things like that? Was the child removed from the house? Was there drug use in the house? There's so many questions and so many reasons why DCF could have gotten involved. And so, again, if this was an unstable household, why was it unstable? Was it a result of the father's actions? All of these would then possibly feed into motive, or at least feed into having an explanation as to how and why this even came to be.
If convicted, what sentence could the suspect be facing?
He would be facing life. He would be facing life in prison.
Absolutely.
Is there any opportunity for a plea deal in this case, or usually with second-degree murder, they don't really plead down?
There's always the opportunity for a plea. Again, depending on the strength of the prosecution's evidence, depending on what the coroner's findings are, all of those things will weigh into the strength and the weaknesses of the case. And obviously, if it's something that can go either way, oftentimes a plea agreement may be the best way to go. Also, the defendant may not want to roll the dice and go to trial, and just might be like, you know what? I've been caught on this. Let me just see if a 25-year plea is an option. Again, I believe he's 36 years old, so that could give him the opportunity to be, out and live some portion of his life on the outside before, the end. But, again, if the prosecutor is very strong and feels that their facts and their case is very strong, they may not want to offer a deal, or maybe the plea is life and that's it.
Well, it seems as if the suspect is maintaining his innocence. His family created a GoFundMe page where they are trying to raise money for, a defense attorney. How long could this take? Like, what does a typical trial timeline look like for a case like this?
Usually it would maybe be like 2 to 3 years, again, because of the all the evidence that needs to be gathered. The decomposition might be a huge factor. Obviously, in Florida, we have depositions, so there's that opportunity for defense counsel to do more investigation, bring in witnesses, investigate any alibi that the defendant may bring forth. And so all of that does take time. And so 2 to 3 years would be pretty much a normal range for this type of case.
Great. Well, this is a story that we will definitely be following. Thank you so much, Melba, for joining us today.
Thank you, Kennedy.
Wiley was denied bond on his second-degree murder charge. He is barred from having contact with several of his family members. For Law and Crime News, I'm Kennedy Walker.
Oh, 7 of them family members. Wonder who was those people, huh? Did he have other children? Just wondering, but I'm going to try to keep up with this because this girl been missing since 2023, but the trial case is coming up. Hold on. The trial case is coming up now. So this is another one I would like to keep up with to see how much time this monster get. No. He need to just go on and go to jail for life. Let him just stay there. That's what he needs to be. That's what he need to be. But I'm gonna see, can I don't forget this story, and it's another story I want to keep up with too. Oh, the story with the little girl from Pennsylvania. Yeah, I'm gonna keep up with that story also. Yeah. I mean, once they when they bring something, I can bring it out. Yeah. Let me see. I don't know what this one here about, but let me just see what. I don't know, girl. People is just you just don't know. You never know who live next door to you. You never know who you're working with. You don't know. You don't know these people. You can know somebody for years and years, and you think you know them. In reality, you still don't know them. And I'm just
Enjoy
being,
5-star
I'm
savings
just
on
being
customer
honest.
favorites today at Raymore and Flanagan. Want to buy now and pay later?
People
Take
don't even
advantage
know
of
their own
72-month
parents.
no-interest financing.
People don't even know their own kids. Okay? And I say that because do you think this little girl would ever thought that her dad would do this to her? Hold on, y'all. I'm trying to get this to the beginning. Come on. All right. I watched a little bit of this, y'all. I didn't watch all, so I don't really know like all of it.
All those things so he'd know what foreplay was when he got a girlfriend. Let that sink in. A 13-year-old child.
Hold on.
Before we agree that a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush, I'm going to need to know a little more about these birds.
Okay. Let's see here.
Story, we go to Poinciana, Florida, about an hour away from Orlando, where a middle school assistant principal is facing disturbing allegations involving a 13-year-old student. Her name is Dr. Kiva Lark. She's married, respected, and in a position of power at Lake Marion Creek Middle School. According to the Polk County Sheriff's Office, a male student was sent to Lark's office for throwing balled up paper during a test. But what happened next wasn't discipline. It was alleged bad behavior that would lead to her arrest. Witnesses and the students say Lark told the team to rub her feet since, quote, he didn't have anything better to do with his hands. Here's what the Polk County Sheriff says happens next.
She promptly took her feet out of her stinky shoes and put them in his lap. And as he's massaging her feet, she says, "You're not doing it right." And she starts massaging his arm and shoulder and says, "Do it like that."
Then it reportedly escalated. Lark was heard saying, quote, "Rub my feet like you love me." According to deputies, she told the student all those things so he'd know what foreplay was when he got a girlfriend. Let that sink in. A 13-year-old child in the assistant principal's office being told to perform what authorities say was an inappropriate act. Several days later, a witness says Lark expressed regret, admitting she crossed the line. But by then, the damage had already been done. On April 5th, the school principal reported the incident to authorities, and the deeper investigators looked, the more they found. The teen told deputies Lark had also called him sexy chocolate in the hallway. When questioned, Sheriff Grady Judd said Lark called the foot rubbing a joke, claiming she was trying to humble the student. She's now facing 2 serious charges, lewd conduct and a lewd offense against a student by an authority figure. Authorities say Dr. Lark later admitted that her actions were inappropriate for her profession, but she denied saying anything inappropriate to the victim. Dr. Kiva Clark is now on administrative leave pending the outcome of the investigation. And joining me to talk more about this is legal expert and author of the novel Open Bar, which is coming out this August, Dan Shore. Dan, thank you so much for joining us today. Let's dive right in. Can you explain the charges? What exactly is lewd conduct?
Well, in this case, the allegations are that this assistant principal at a school who is in her 50s, I believe, had a student who is being brought to her office as part of some disciplinary response, had this male student who was 13 years old massage her feet and made other sexualized comments to her. And there seemed to be, from what law enforcement says, at least 2 other witnesses to this. So a lot of times we have these kinds of cases and it's just the word of the alleged victim. And in this case, if law enforcement's accurate, there's actually other people who either witnessed this or overheard part of it. So that makes it an even stronger case for the prosecution.
What does lewd conduct by an authority figure entail, and how is it different from just general misconduct?
I think when people abuse their power, it sometimes makes it an even worse situation, because one thing is that kids are told to trust their teachers, listen to their teachers, especially an assistant principal or principal, someone in authority. And when we see someone allegedly violate that power, violate that trust that the student and their family and other people have in them, then that makes it a more heightened crime, not just in the criminal sense, but also in terms of possible disciplinary action by the school. I conduct sexual misconduct investigations regularly for schools across the country. And when someone's in a position of trust and power, often people will agree to do things with them, including sexual things, because again, people are told to listen to their authority figures. We tell people all the time, students, kids, if the principal tells you to do something, you listen to them, right? So here you have a 13-year-old being told by the assistant principal, massage my feet, allegedly, and he went along with that according to the allegations.
And the alleged victim, he was 13 years old. Does the victim's age increase the severity of the charges?
Absolutely. Anytime someone in authority asks someone to do something like this, that's going to be, at a minimum, something that they can get either suspended or fired for. Often it's criminal charges, but also engaging in some type of sexual interactions with someone who's younger is illegal in every state of the country if they're underage. Many states have specific laws that if someone's a student and someone's an authority figure or an employee at a school, that makes it an even worse penalty. But to go back to your specific question, the younger the person is, the more egregious it is. It's wrong if someone's 17 or 16 and they're a student, but it's even more egregious if they're 13. They're in less of a position to push back, to assert themselves. So anyone who's underage, it's wrong to do this, but if someone's 13, it's even more egregious.
How many years is she looking at, if any? I mean, because this could potentially be her first defense. If this is her first defense, then could she just get probation?
Well, I started as a sex crimes prosecutor 25 years ago, and I prosecuted cases similar to this, although not involving required foot massages by teachers. I had other types of sexual abuse, and I investigate those cases now. There's a lot of factors in terms of what a sentence would be. One would be any prior record that this person has. Another big factor is what the victim and the victim's family are looking for, because sometimes to get a significant prison sentence, you need to actually go to trial. And a lot of times a family may not want their 13-year-old to go through that. Whether the defendant pleads guilty and takes responsibility is a big factor, because often that leads to a lesser sentence, maybe even a non-incarceratory sentence. So those are some of the factors that will determine whether or not there's a long prison sentence or any type of jail sentence from this.
And we talked about it a little bit, moments ago, but let's just dive more into the power dynamic here. I mean, a student and an administrator, let's just talk more about that, about how, just like how you said, egregious it is.
Sure. One thing that we see in many of these cases that I've prosecuted and investigated is someone taking advantage of the power and control over another person. And again, when someone's an assistant principal in authority over a 13-year-old, the 13-year-old is consistently told throughout their
With Cashback Plus checking from Affinity Federal Credit Union, earn 10% cash back and enjoy free nationwide ATM access. No monthly fees.
The fathers, the mothers, the grandmothers, what in the
lives,
world
listen to your teachers. Most kids are told that's what you have to do. If an assistant principal tells you to come into their office and then tells you to rub their feet, it's a very, very difficult situation for that 13-year-old to be in, because they probably don't want to do that, but they're also concerned that what heightened consequences would there be for them if they say no? It's hard to push back against someone like that who has control over your academic career and your life at school. So using that power to get someone else to engage in inappropriate conduct like this makes it even more egregious. And we see that in a lot of places in life, not just in schools, but I investigate at companies, people in authority who make the other person, the victim, feel, well, I don't want to do this, but if I say no, what are going to be the consequences? Will there be retaliation? And that's a scary thing for someone to have to think about.
Lark reportedly said she crossed the line to one of the witnesses. Could that be used as a confession in court?
Absolutely. So if someone says something such as I crossed the line, that would be a confession. The question would be the reliability of that witness who said they heard that from this defendant. So if the person who says they heard that or were told that testifies or tells law enforcement and it's deemed credible in trial by a jury or a judge, if it's a bench trial, or just as a part of the evidence consideration in plea bargain negotiations, that's definitely going to be a big factor because, as I said before, a lot of these cases, you just have the alleged victim and the defendant and no other person who is present. Here, it seems, based on what law enforcement has said, that other people heard or saw some of this. And also, as you just mentioned, one of them said that they received what really is a confession to say that they went too far.
Can prosecutors also use her alleged nickname for the student, which was Sexy Chocolate, as evidence of intent or pattern?
Yes, because it's another piece of showing alleged inappropriate conduct, because even without the foot massage, having a sexualized nickname for a 13-year-old in school shows that someone is breaking the norms of what is appropriate in their school. So it may show a pattern. And if the defense is that, oh, I would never do anything inappropriate, but other people heard them using this nickname in front of other people, that doesn't necessarily prove that there was this foot massage, but it does show that this defendant was breaking the rules of decorum, treating people in a really inappropriate way who are, in this case, the boy was 13 years old. So that is definitely powerful evidence if that's used by law enforcement.
Now, the Polk County Sheriff is saying that during the interview, the assistant principal allegedly said that this was all a joke and that she was just doing this to humble the student. Could that be a defense?
Well, that may be true. It might have been a joke to the assistant principal. That doesn't mean it was a joke to the students. So maybe the assistant principal thought it was funny as a disciplinary measure to make him rub her feet. But from the 13-year-old's perspective, that is a really scary, inappropriate thing to be asked to do. So I don't think that's a real defense at all. It certainly doesn't make the allegations change. If the person's saying, well, yeah, I had a 13-year-old massage my feet as part of discipline for some alleged misbehavior, just because it was a joke. And I see that in sexual harassment cases a lot when I investigate them and the person who's the sexual harasser says, oh, I was just joking. But for the other person, it's not a joke. And that's a really important factor here.
Why would you even do that?
What responsibility does the school have in just protecting their students from staff misconduct? And could they potentially be liable?
That's a great question. Whenever I do an investigation like this, there's always two main parts of it. One is, what did the person who's accused of misconduct do? And the second part is, what did the school know about? And that is always an important part of an investigation like this, maybe not by law enforcement, but by the school administrators to determine, were there warning signs? Did people hear about this nickname that you referenced before and not do anything? Because sometimes before there's an egregious act like the alleged foot massage, there's other types of misconduct like that nickname. And if someone intervened and stopped it from escalating, that could have been helpful. So when you're talking about what kind of liability there is, a big factor is, well, what was known, what should have been known, and were warning signs ignored? Or was this something that no one knew this was going on until this latest act allegedly happened?
What is power? Maybe the better question is, how much of it can you handle? Can the GM...
Are there any federal laws like Title IX that can come into play here as well?
Yeah, I'm an expert in Title IX investigations, and Title IX would require the school to do an investigation and have some type of process and outcome, and they have concurrent jurisdiction with law enforcement. So while law enforcement's investigating it, the school has a requirement too. But Title IX is a requirement for the schools to do their own internal process to enforce everyone having an experience at school that doesn't have sexual harassment or sexual assault. So it's not a criminal statute, Title IX, but it would require the school to do a thorough investigation with due process for everybody.
Now, if this does go to trial, does the student need to testify, or can the case just move forward without him?
There's no legal requirement for the student to testify, but it would be hard to get a conviction without that student, because the prosecution needs to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. One way they could do that without the student's testimony is if other people did witness the conduct and they testified to it. So that's one way to get a conviction without the student. But often without the student, it's hard to show a jury that has to unanimously find someone guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. It's hard to do that without the student, but it certainly can be done. There are other witnesses, if there's the admission that you talked about before. So it's not impossible, but it's more challenging then.
Well, like how you said, it's potentially more challenging. Is there, hypothetically, if the student doesn't want to do it, they're scared, or, the parents doesn't want this to happen, could the case just be dropped or at least just pleaded down?
Well, it's very common for these cases to result in a plea bargain. And in fact, few of them do go to trial. Often there is some kind of plea agreement. And what the plea agreement is sometimes is partially based on whether or not the alleged victim wants to testify, because that gives the prosecution more confidence in going to trial and less need to agree to a lesser plea bargain. But if they know this student's never going to testify in court, their family doesn't want them to, the government's under more pressure to get some type of plea bargain. So at least there's some type of conviction, some type of consequence. And that's going to be one of the things that the government weighs when they're prosecuting this case.
What legal protections are in place to shield the child from re-traumatization if he does decide to testify?
Well, hopefully whoever's prosecuting this, whatever prosecutor's working on it, also gets services for that student, counseling services, support services. Same thing with the school. They should be supportive. One thing that is part of re-traumatization is a fear of retaliation, and that's very common in a case like this. So making sure that both the school and the prosecutors explain the rules that hopefully will protect this 13-year-old from retaliation from either this teacher or other people. It's a very challenging thing to testify in public about something like this. It can be embarrassing. There's a lot of misplaced self-blame on the part of victims in cases like this. So there are a lot of counseling groups in place now that didn't exist 20, 30 years ago. So hopefully that gives support for the student.
Now let's talk a little bit about the alleged witnesses. We know that all school employees are considered mandated reporters. Could any of the witnesses who reportedly watched this incident happen get in trouble for not stepping in and stopping it right away?
It's possible. They're certainly going to be asked about that. Maybe if they are cooperating with the investigation and the prosecution, then that's going to be in return for not facing consequences for their failure to act. Maybe they were part of how this came to light. That's something that will be looked into. But the fact that they're cooperating now and giving information now certainly helps their case if they are accused. But a lot of times, as I said before, when a school is looked at for their responsibility, the things that are looked at are other employees aware of the misconduct, and do they allow it to occur? So that's a great question. I think that's something that needs to be looked into more, both by the school itself and by law enforcement.
Now, this is an assistant principal. We don't know who the witnesses are, but, I'm just thinking about the hierarchy of schools. The only person above the assistant principal is the principal and then the superintendent. So just hypothetically, playing devil's advocate, could the witness, who I'm assuming, let's just pretend is under the assistant principal, say like, hey, I was afraid as well to stop it, to speak up, because they, were just scared of losing their job potentially?
Yes, and we see that all the time, where people are afraid to speak up about misconduct because they're worried about retaliation against them. And unfortunately, that's not a fear that is irrational. A lot of people do experience retaliation when they do speak up about misconduct. So it's really important for any school, any organization, to create a culture where they tell people, if you see some type of misconduct, especially involving a student and an authority figure, here's where you should go to speak up. Here's the person who's the point person you can go to, and encourage people regularly to do that. Let people know where they can contact the right person. Because a lot of times I talk to school officials, teachers who want to report something, and they say, well, I didn't really know where I should go. So that's really important. And that's something that will be looked at here. What policies, procedures did the school have, and how were the employees and students told about those, so they knew where to go if they saw something?
Could the student's family pursue a civil lawsuit against, the assistant principal or even the school?
Well, certainly against the assistant principal, they could, if this is true, what the allegations are. And against the school, anyone could pursue a civil lawsuit. I think one of the big factors about whether they're successful is whether the school was in a position to stop this earlier. Was there something in this assistant principal?
Yeah, it can be a little hard to school didn't know. They did know, they took action right away. So I will say
I will sign an executive order to begin eliminating the Federal Department of Education.
Donald Trump is killing the Department of Education and attacking.
No, I feel like she never need to work with children again.
Background check that they ignored before hiring them, or were there other warning signs such as that nickname that was being used? Were people aware of that and ignoring that? So those are the types of things that might lead to enhanced civil liability for the school.
Let's talk about attorney strategies. What are the biggest challenges the prosecution may face here?
The biggest challenge I've faced in cases like this is cooperation of the victim, because very often, for understandable reasons, a 13-year-old or someone around their age does not want to testify in court. Their family doesn't want them to testify in court.
Yeah.
They don't want their name to get out there. A lot of media keeps the name anonymous, but if someone's testifying in court, often it will get out there. And people understandably don't want that. And that makes it more difficult to get a prosecution that's successful. So that's definitely the biggest factor from the prosecution in terms of challenges.
And just going back to, the family suing, I thought of something. Could they possibly sue for emotional distress as well?
Sure. Whenever someone sues in a case like this, that's definitely a big part of what the lawsuit is, the consequences to that student, whether it interfered with their ability to engage in school after that. A lot of people who experienced sexual misconduct in the educational institution then have a lot of trouble going back to school, excuse me, and learning and studying and things like that when it's the place where they just went through this very, very negative experience. So that's it. And then we've seen people unable to participate in activities, do other things after that because of the trauma. So that is a big part of a lawsuit like this.
If convicted, would Dr. Lark have to register as a sex offender?
That would probably be the case. A lot of it depends on what the specific statute is there and also what the
right.
conviction is for. Is there a plea bargain for something that's less? Or if there's a conviction of the top count, then I would expect there would be some registration requirement after that.
Wow.
And how would, walk us through that process? Because that means, hypothetically, that Dr. Lark would lose everything. She has been an educator for, I'm assuming, many years. Now, if you become a registered sex offender, that means that you can't continue your career.
Right. I would suspect if an assistant principal is actually convicted with a criminal charge for having a student have to massage her feet, that person's not going to be allowed to work in another school after that. I just can't imagine another school who knows about this and the name is out there now. So it would be part of any background check allowing that person to be hired. But again, all defendants are innocent until proven guilty. Maybe there's a defense here. Maybe there's other facts that we don't know about because they haven't been publicly said yet. So we shouldn't assume that the person is guilty. But if someone is convicted for something like this, I have a hard time seeing how they would be put in a position of authority over children again.
Right.
Well, let's talk more about the defense. What would a solid defense strategy be? If you were defending her, what would you suggest?
I think any defense side has to first look at the strength of the case. So if the other witnesses were present or they overheard something and this confession, if the defense knows that this confession was real, then I think the strategy really needs to be one of negotiation with the prosecution and try to get the least severe conviction in some type of plea bargain. Because if you do have the student testifying and you have other people saying they either heard or saw it and you have this supposed confession, it's hard to see how a defendant would not be convicted at trial. So a big part of defense strategy is assessing the strength of the case and then negotiating for a plea bargain. So maybe they could negotiate for a reduced conviction that doesn't have jail time, maybe sparing this person having to register as a sex offender. But I still don't see how with any conviction at all, this person would be able to teach again or be an assistant principal again. But again, maybe there are facts that we don't know about that show that this did not happen as it's been alleged.
How long do these types of cases typically take to go through the court system?
Unfortunately, the court systems grind very slowly, and some of these trials take up to a year to get to, maybe even more. A lot of it depends on also, are there plea negotiations that are going on for a while, and that could delay things. Usually it's in the defense's interest to delay things because the longer it goes, the more the witnesses, their memories fade, their interest in testifying fades. So I know as a former prosecutor, you don't want it to be delayed. And often the defense is the one delaying it, trying to buy more time, trying to get more information that'll help them negotiate a plea bargain. But a lot of these cases don't go to trial for a year or more.
All right. Well, this is something that we will definitely be following. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me on. It's great talking with you.
Polk County Public Schools Superintendent released a statement saying, quote, "This is abhorrent behavior for anyone who works among students, especially an administrator." This person no longer has any business being around children. We commend the school principal for immediately reporting this incident so we could take action and work with the Polk County Sheriff's Office to protect students. For Law and Crime, I'm Kennedy Walker.
So she don't need to ever work with children again. Like never. Literally never. That's why I say you don't know who is who no more. You don't know who you're living next door to no more. You just don't know nothing no more. You really don't. Now, who in the world thinks she would do that to a child? Like, who in the world would think she would go to school and tell a child something like that? So, I'm telling you, just, I don't know. I mean, you send your kids to school to, to learn, and, your kids, they trust the teachers and the principals and whoever. You know what I'm saying? They don't want to feel uncomfortable. All right, I think this is going to be the last one for the day, so let's check it out, see what it is.
When you pay rent with Bilt, you earn valuable points every month to redeem toward flights with world-class airlines, stays across all major hotel programs, Amazon.com.
It's just an undescribable pain that we feel with what's going on with what happened with Shakira Rucker.
A Florida mom of 4 goes missing, and her family launches a desperate search to find her. But they are left heartbroken when a strange smell coming from a closed storage unit alerted witnesses that something wasn't right. Police body cam video gives us a closer look at how the investigation played out and the brutal crime spree the suspect allegedly went on that left a woman dead. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Authorities in Orange County, Florida say a man named Corey Hill shot and killed his estranged wife, 37-year-old Shakira Rucker, in 2023 in his rented storage unit and left her body inside to decompose. From there, He allegedly went on a wild crime spree before finally being taken into custody. At last check, he now faces 9 charges, including first-degree murder and attempted second-degree murder, and the state seeking the death penalty in this case. Now, Shakira was a mom of 4 kids, then 7, 9, 16, and 18 years old. Her family told Fox Orlando that she was a devoted member of her church and a beloved part of the community. But I want to lay all this out for you. I want to lay out exactly what authorities believe happened here. So we begin with family members who reported to the Orange County Sheriff's Office that they last heard from Shakira on November 11th, 2023. Multiple agencies in Orlando and the surrounding areas were involved in a search to find her, with the sheriff saying deputies were putting in 16 to 18-hour days as they tried to find her. Now, according to Winter Springs Police, on the night of November 11th, Shakira was seen on surveillance video at a restaurant with Corey Hill. Next morning, the two were seen entering the storage facility known as Your Storage Units in Apopka. According to investigators, Hill was apparently seen leaving, but Shakira never came out. Authorities say Hill shot Shakira inside that storage unit, his storage unit, closed it up, and left. Nearly a week later, on November 18th, deputies were called out to that facility because of a bad smell and some sort of liquid starting to ooze out from under the door. Authorities later said that was blood. According to court documents, the property manager had already opened the unit door and thought she saw a human head. Body cam video shows 2 deputies responding, and they're directed to the storage unit, which is closed, but it doesn't have a lock, so they open it up.
All right. Is it unlocked? Oh.
You have to look that to the side.
Except for a black female, no pulse, no vitals.
As the investigation got underway, deputies learned that a witness, who was a storage unit right next to Hill's, had reported to employees that there was something off with the nearby unit. And he claims the employees kind of brushed it off, saying it was probably oil or something that had spilled, and that they couldn't open up the unit without permission from the owner, from the tenant. And deputies spoke with the witness the day after Shakira's body was found.
When I went over there, got the car, drove to the event, hung out with my girlfriend. When I came back, it was like 6:40, so the office is closed. And I noticed something was dripping towards my unit. I filmed it, I took pictures of it, and then...
that was about what time?
It was 6:40, 6:45. It's
on Sunday afternoon?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then, but no one was there, so I couldn't tell them, you know, hey, what's happening. So I came back because I was getting sick, and I had to do another thing. Monday morning, I went back to over there, told them, hey, this is what's happening. There were 3 workers there. One of them wasn't taking me that seriously, and the other one, he was like, okay, well, I told him, come with me, I'll take pictures, because, you know, it's seeping into my unit. Yeah. And after that, they told me they were going to call me. And I was sick, so I stayed home the rest of the time. And then Saturday, when you guys were
yesterday,
over there,
so 6 days later,
I went there in the morning because I was getting better. And I told her, hey, what's the update? You know, what's going on? She didn't know anything about it. She told me that the manager had told her it was like an oil spill.
Did you speak to the same person or
it was a different girl?
A different employee?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then when I went into my unit, that's when I noticed it started to smell bad.
Okay.
And she was like, I can't do anything about it.
Exactly, Shirley and Brittany.
And
Absolutely.
They can't go in there?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I'm asking you all these questions, and I'm going to have you fill out a statement.
Yeah.
And I really need that statement to be how you're telling me.
What you're telling us
very
verbatim.
Specific to the detail. Yes. If you
Damn, these commercials get on my nerves, yo. Hold on, y'all, because I had to go through so much to get them off. Oh, hold on. Oh, Lord, child, they get on my nerve, okay? Hold on, y'all. God, they get on my nerve, them commercials.
If you run out of space, I'm gonna get you more paper because it seems like you're gonna run out of space.
Okay.
I'm gonna have you more paper, but this needs to be really detailed. And then also, when you saw that that leakage on Sunday, did it see like was it like fresh, like liquidy?
Yes. It looked okay. So there was red, obviously.
Yeah.
But there's also like a clear liquid. So my thought was maybe someone stuck a fridge in there with some old meat and it just dripped out.
Yeah.
That's why I wasn't too keen on calling right away. But if I would have known. Yeah.
And you obviously know what the situation is now.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you saw on the news,
you
right?
did your part.
Yeah, I found out through my girlfriend. She's the one that's like, is this your storage unit area? I was like, yeah, it is.
Mm-hmm.
And now that I went over there, got the car, I noticed there's no lock on the unit next door. So I'm like, okay. I put two together. I don't like that they weren't taking me seriously with the whole situation.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So,
wow.
Now, this witness took a few photos of what he saw, saying the liquid was leaking toward his unit.
So that's when I noticed it, November 12th.
You noticed all that right there?
All that was happening. Yeah.
Well, how many more pictures are there?
There's
they bleared it out,
y'all.
y'all.
I zoomed in and I took a flash one because I kind of noticed that it was red.
November 12th, 6:47 p.m.
Yep. And then that video was by accident. You can't really see anything.
Okay. So we'll just
focus on the other one.
Yep. Can you email these pictures to us? And then we'll give you our work email.
The deputies went over the timeline with the witness, who says when he first went to his unit on November 12th, there was nothing amiss. But when he came back later that day, that's when he noticed the liquid. And police believe that Shakira was shot sometime after the unit neighbor left, but before he came back on November 12th.
So around 7 and 7:30, you went to go pick up that car.
Yes.
And you didn't see
Yes,
anything.
she said it was blood.
Good to know. All right. And then when you came back at 6:46 to drop the car back off, that's when you saw it? Okay.
Now, a warrant for Corey Hill's arrest for murder gives us more details about what investigators found at the scene. It reads, quote, deputies arrived on scene and smelled the distinct odor of human decomposition emanating from storage locker 3032. The storage unit was then opened, and a black female in blue shirt and blue pants, remember that attire, blue shirt, blue pants, was found and pronounced deceased. And the female's hair was a fired cartridge casing. So employees were able to give deputies information about Hill's rental history, as well as a copy of his driver's license. And deputies obtained a search warrant, documented what they found in the arrest paperwork. It reads, there was also blood near the female on the ground and walls. There was no evidence to suggest the victim was shot somewhere outside of the storage unit and then moved into the storage unit. There is evidence that the perpetrator attempted to conceal the body haphazardly by placing 2 tires in front of the body. Based on the positioning of the female's body, the tires were placed there after the female fell to the floor. Then you have video surveillance. So video surveillance at the storage facility reportedly showed Hill arriving in his car with someone in the passenger seat wearing, remember what I said, a blue shirt and blue pants, so the exact attire worn by the victim in this case. When the car leaves about 20 minutes later, according to deputies, no one is in the passenger seat. According to the arrest warrant, Rucker had recently discovered her estranged husband had been in a romantic relationship and living with another female. Rucker and the paramour learned they had both been deceived by Hill. So, according to deputies, in the hours after he allegedly killed Shakira, he tried to kill this other woman as well. So deputies discovered that a woman named Angel Milligan actually had a protective order in place against Hill. But approximately 3 hours after he's believed to have killed Shakira, Hill reportedly showed up at Milligan's house with a gun. According to an arrest warrant for this incident, Milligan was outside her home with her cousin Christopher, and her 2 sons were inside. Angel advised that she looked down the street and noticed a black vehicle, which she identified as the vehicle belonging to Corey Hill, ex-boyfriend of 2 months. Angel said she recognized the vehicle because it was an ambassador sign on the outside of it. The vehicle approached the front of her house. Corey exited the vehicle while holding a small black handgun. Angel and Christopher began running towards the front door in an attempt to enter the residence, and Corey immediately began shooting at them. Angel said she heard what she believes was a round or a bullet fly closely by her ear. So the warrant says that Milligan hid in the bathroom while her cousin went to a bedroom, and he told deputies that Hill kicked down the door of the bedroom holding a gun at his side. Christopher claims that he was holding...
Wait, y'all, this
When I don't feel good, getting just any old care doesn't feel good either. But talking to an expert Hackensack Meridian Health physician who knows what I need, that feels better.
Wait, I've heard
other people's doc as well, but also mine.
This can't be real.
Imagine drifting off to 5-star sleep every night. Make that dream a reality with a top-rated mattress from Raymore and Flanagan. Sleep better for as little as $15 a month with no interest for 72.
Milligan's 1-year-old son at the time. Hill was allegedly holding a gun down at his side and demanded to know where Milligan was. Now, at some point, Hill left the home. Milligan, her cousin, her children, they were physically unharmed. But the warrant goes on to detail the damage that was done, or apparently done, to Milligan's home. Quote, upon responding to the residence, there were 4 bullet holes observed in the front door, casing found outside of the front door. There were 2 bullet holes located on the back wall where there's a desk and computer station set up, and 1 bullet hole observed on the side of the wall in the living room area, which is where the children were sitting at the time of the shooting. There was also video surveillance of Corey running up to the home with a firearm and surveillance showing him kicking in the kitchen window and entering the residence. So according to the warrant, Milligan had called Shakira, who she learned was Hill's wife, and when Hill found out, he reportedly told Milligan she would regret doing that. Now, in terms of a timeline here, Hill was actually arrested for that shooting at Milligan's home first before being connected to the storage unit where Shakira's body was found. So at last check, right now, in all, he faces 9 counts in Orange County Court. First-degree murder with a firearm, attempted first-degree murder with a firearm, 3 counts of attempted second-degree murder with a firearm, burglary of a dwelling with an assault or battery with a firearm, shooting at, within, or into a building, possession of a firearm by a convicted felon, keep that in mind, violation of domestic violence injunction or foreign protection order by threatening violence. We were able to see that huge list of charges not only on the Orange County Court website, but also on Truthfinder, the powerful background checker that's able to locate Hill's profile in seconds using just his name and location. And yes, we use Truthfinder to get details on people involved in our stories. But even if you don't work in true crime, it can be an excellent resource to give you some peace of mind. After all, it's one of the largest public record search services in the United States. And with a paid subscription service, you can get access to unlimited reports about almost anyone. So right now, you get 50% 10% off of your first month of confidential background reports. Just go to truthfinder.com/LC sidebar. And get this, Hill has not only been accused of murder before, but he was convicted and served time in prison on this. According to WESH in Orlando, Hill was featured in a news report back in 1992 in Suffolk, Virginia. His car had apparently been stolen with his 2-year-old daughter inside. She was actually thrown out of the car window as 2 suspects got away, but reportedly only had cuts and bruises. But according to police, Hill ended up seeking revenge against one of the suspects, confronting him at this guy's home. There was some sort of fight. This altercation ended up with Hill shooting the man. He was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to 20 years in prison. Now, it's unclear exactly when he got out, but he reportedly moved to Orlando in 2016, according again to WESH. Angel Milligan told Fox 35 Orlando that she didn't know about Hill's criminal past. So for this heinous series of crimes in Florida, the prosecutor's office announced in January of 2024 they would be seeking the death penalty against Hill. At a news conference announcing this update, Shakira's sister was given a chance to speak on behalf of the family.
We stand here vulnerable and open to share that it's been difficult for our family during this time. It's been a very emotional roller coaster. We've been angry, we've been sad, very confused. It's just an undescribable pain that we feel with what's going on with what happened with Shakira Rucker.
Yeah, that man is dangerous.
We'll never have the chance to talk to her again. We'll never have the chance to spend any time. Her children will never be able to see her again. It's hard. It's hard.
She was overcome with emotion, really couldn't continue. So her brother finished things up.
I know that we as a family are moving forward. I know that this decision may not bring my sister back, but it's a step in the direction for justice. As a person of faith, I pray for everybody involved and that God put a hedge of protection over their hearts, their minds, and their souls.
Now, since Hill's arrest in November of 2023, he's been locked up without bail. His court case has crawled along towards trial. And I want to talk about an interesting motion that was filed by the defense that said all of the storage unit evidence should be suppressed. So the court document reads that
it's that time of the year. Burlington's spring deals are in the air. Styles are sprouting. Brands are blooming.
the body of Shakira Rucker was found in the storage unit. Police made several observations of the body in the storage unit. Although a search warrant was later obtained for the storage unit, it appears that the items found within were removed prior to the service of search warrant. Even if that were not the case, the warrant is premised upon facts discovered in the initial warrantless entry. It continues, police are permitted to enter a premises to respond to an emergency situation without a warrant so long as there is no accompanying intent to search or investigate. In this case, police had no intention of rendering aid or responding to an emergency. They responded with an intent to investigate and did so without a warrant. For that reason, the search of the storage unit should be suppressed. This is a standard defense argument, violation of a defendant's Fourth Amendment rights against unreasonable searches and seizures. But the prosecution pushed back, saying the deputies had permission from the property manager to enter the unit, which is laid out in the rental agreement. Quote, law enforcement's initial viewing of and entry into the subject storage unit was done with the permission of the unit's owner. This matter is governed by a rental agreement that the defendant entered with storage unit's properties. Paragraph 12 of the rental agreement states, owner's right to enter in cases where the owner considers it necessary to enter the space for purposes of examining the space for violations of this agreement or conditions in the space, or for making repairs or alterations thereto, or to otherwise comply with this agreement, the occupant agrees that the owner or the owner's representative shall have the right without notice to enter into the space and to remove contents to another space and continue to store such contents at the sole cost and expense of the occupant. The prosecution also notes law enforcement was acting in their role as community caretakers in opening the subject storage unit in order to determine if there was in fact a deceased human being inside prior to obtaining a search warrant. And in the end, the judge sided with the prosecution, basically saying there were exigent circumstances that allowed the deputies to open the unit, so that motion to suppress by the defense was denied. And for now, the case seems to be on track to go to trial sometime in 2026 with monthly check-ins with the court between now and then. But let me just go back to Shakira for a moment. So Shakira Rucker's family started a GoFundMe to raise money for Shakira's 4 children. On the GoFundMe page, Shakira's sister, Leona, wrote, "It is with heavy hearts that we share the devastating news of the tragic loss of our beloved Shakira. She was a loving mother to 4 beautiful children and a victim of senseless violence. Shakira was murdered by her husband and left lifeless in a storage unit for 6 days. Her family went on a manhunt to locate her. However, a citizen located her first. This was unexpected and has taken a major toll on her children. This is not for burial services. This is strictly for the kids' future." According to the GoFundMe, Shakira's then 18-year-old son was taking over the care of his younger siblings. So it's a really, really sad situation. We'll put up the GoFundMe page. Our hearts and prayers go out to the family.
Of the 18-year-old.
And we will keep a careful eye on updates in this
God
case,
bless
bring them to you as they develop. But that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.
Wow, that is so kind. You know, the brother 18 raising his other siblings. Wow. Wow. Whew. Y'all, you don't know. You don't know who is who no more. You don't know who is who in law enforcement, the schools, the hospitals. You just don't know. You know, a lot of people just need to realize we are living in our last days. Just realize that. You know, I think when a lot of people, you know, and I know a lot of people don't want to think like that, but it is what it is. When you know, really sit and think about it, you know, we living in our last days. So anything happening out here in the world today is really, it's sad, you know what I'm saying? But it's not so much of surprising because you don't know who in the school systems, who in the courthouses, you know, who in the hospitals you're working with. You don't know who live in your household, who living next door to you. I mean, oh God, you just don't know about anything no more. I mean, it's sad. It's just ridiculous, you know. You go to the hospital because you're sick. You don't know who really treating you there. You send your kids to school because they need to be taught. They need the education. You go to the police department because they supposed to be our protectors. You call CPS because they supposed to be our protectors over our children. You get failed by everything out here. You get failed by everything mostly in life. You know, you get failed. And it's just a sad situation. You know, you go to work because you need money to protect to take care of your family. Sometimes we ain't got nobody to turn to but the Lord. You know, we got to stay prayed up. And that's why I always, when I, you know, in my lives, I always say, you know, stay prayed up and always remember to keep God first in your life. Always, because that's all we have. That's all we have is the man upstairs, you know. Don't crash out to the devil. For real, don't. Because that's what the devil wants. He wants us to crash out to him. But thank y'all for timing in. I appreciate y'all guys. I want y'all to enjoy y'all weekend. I will not be live tomorrow. I won't be back until Monday. I'm going to enjoy these 3 days, y'all. Take me an extra day off. So, Mom Dukes, thank you, baby. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Love you, Mama Dukes. Thank you, thank you. So I'll be looking for some stories for next week. I definitely will do that. And I will drop my coffee link in this description when I'm done with the live. So if y'all want to bless me over the weekend, y'all can do that also. But thank you, Mama Dukes. Mama Dukes, thank you, baby. Love you, sis. Thank everybody for timing in. I appreciate y'all. Y'all have a good weekend. Be safe out here. Take the kids, have that little Easter egg hunt. And thank you, Brittany. Thank you, Brittany. I'll see you Monday also. Y'all stay prayed up. Stay prayed up. Stay prayed up. Always remember, keep God first in your life. Yes. So thanks everybody for timing in. I appreciate y'all for rocking out with me. And I will definitely see you guys on Monday. Peace and love.